Damn. Welcome back to the weekly podcast. I'm your commentator and host. I'm just going to check this real quick. Okay, we're good. Some of the end of the year stories. There's still new stories coming in. 2017 isn't over yet, guys. So 2017 was a pretty busy year, and I will be doing a kind of a summarizer clip at the end of this year sometime, at some point. Right now, seems like again, I've went through like a whole week with hardly any stories that seem to merit like a big, let's do a clip for it. And maybe I should have just did a bunch of little clips, but I don't know, I'm trying to iron it out. I might even come up with some kind of schedule or something. But it's hard to do that because, weed news stories don't always happen on a schedule. But there's other things to talk about. And there's other clips that I've been meaning to do that I haven't done. And another thing on this weekly show is I'm running into like problems trying to multitask the grow tips into this show. So I don't know if that's going to really work out for a minute, but I'm going to do what I plan on doing is just knocking out like a whole bunch of grow tips one day, and then I'll have them just stick on the end of these videos. But in the meantime, you might see me release a grow tip video standalone. You never know, because I'm working on one right now. It's taking longer than I thought, but I want it to be complete. I want it to be thorough. I don't want it to be half-assed or whatever. So let's see. Let's get right into it. Shit. So Uruguay has the program where they legalize marijuana that they pass out to people at the pharmacy or something like that. But apparently the quality hasn't really been all that great. And apparently they're starting to go up in the quality. Now, I don't understand this at all. I have no idea why you would start out at 2% THC. Like, I'm not sure what the point of that would be. But their customer base is growing. Let's just read it. Uruguay's government has increased the THC limit for recreational customers from 2% to 9%, meaning the country is a step closer to full-strength adult use program. Like, who's the bar that they're comparing? Who set the bar that they have to compare to? I think they're the only people doing what they're doing. So I don't understand where these measurements come from. So 5 months after the launch of the recreational cannabis sales, more than 16,000 Uruguayans have registered to buy marijuana, the Independent reported. Roughly 5,000 had signed up for the recreational program when its sales began on July 19th. Here's what to know. Uruguay is the first country in the world to legalize production, sale, and consumption of cannabis. Although more Uruguayans are signing up to buy recreational cannabis, the market remains limited. Adult use marijuana may be distributed in Uruguay's only by pharmacy, but just a handful have signed on to sell it. And we've seen a thing go on between now and when the original legalization happened, where the big banks, mainly American banks and the big world banks, threatened them. They said, "Hey, we're not going to do business with you if you keep doing business with these pharmacies." And then the pharmacies in turn are like, "Well, then we're not going to keep doing this weed shit either." So they had a few pharmacies, and then the numbers went down. But apparently there was some diehards that stuck it out, and they're still going. So only 2 Uruguayan companies are licensed to grow cannabis. Selling medical marijuana remains illegal in the South American country. So that's pretty cool there, pretty weird, and all at the same time, one of those stories that we're just going to have to wait and see how things go, see what else happens. Pretty sure the experiment's working so far as like you can go to the pharmacy and get weed. All right, you can only get a certain amount a week from them. And I think it's really cheap. It's not free, but at the same time, what other country do they have a government-run program where you can get weed at the pharmacy? Well, maybe Italy. You never know. This is how the Italian army might provide free marijuana if they can grow enough. In Italy, the job of growing, processing, and packaging cannabis for your fellow citizens' consumption is solely that of the military. Italy is like most Western European or Europe in allowing sick people to access cannabis with the central government's imprimatur. Unlike other weed-friendly Western democracies, in Italy the military has a monopoly on domestic cannabis production. A heavily guarded army installed outside of Florence produces the Italian medical marijuana supply, all 220 pounds of it, which heads to pharmacies before reaching patients' hands. Quote, that's not exactly a flood of cannabis. You could find home grows in California with greater production capacities. But the trickle is soon to become a torrent. The Italian military's chemical pharmaceutical plants production could triple within a year with a proposed $2 million boost in funding, the newspaper reported. Weed it could then send to the Pope, sort of. A plan to export cannabis to the Vatican is in the works, according to the Italian Army Colonel Antonio Medica, who runs the military grow house. Quote, $2 billion for a few hundred pounds of pot? That's rank inefficiency. I could do better on a brief trip to Colorado, you're telling yourself. Maybe you're right, but you see, you'd be paying for that pot. You'd be paying for the pot. Under the Italian plan, medical cannabis would be supplied to eligible citizens free of charge. I think what they meant is that you'd get paid for that pot. Or I don't know. You get the drift. Italy legalized medical marijuana in 2007, but the country made it nearly impossible to obtain thanks to an epic bureaucracy. You hear that, California and Canada? With private enterprise drowned in paperwork and still stuck with fulfillment of its promises to its citizens, the Italian government dumped the job of growing pot onto the army in 2014 because handling drugs was already part of its mission. In Italy, health is a matter of national security, a defense official told the Post. Man, that should be looked at like that in America. If you told that to the tax people that tell you what we're doing with our tax money in Washington, man, do you realize that they give more than 60% of all the tax money that they collect and whatever else money that they raise for the discretionary budget, 60+% goes to the fucking military in this country. All you have to do is tell them that health is a matter of national security. Maybe they'll start using some of that money to give everybody health care in America. That would be nice. Italian soldiers produce a single strain of pot called FM2. FM2 is low in THC again, clocking in at about 8%. Well, hey, you're doing pretty good. And that's enough for a mild giggly buzz for most marijuana smoking Americans, and ergo not useful to cannabis patients with certain symptoms, including MS. These sick people must import their pot from elsewhere in Europe. It can be done, mind you, and legally it just takes a long time and is exorbitantly expensive. Imported cannabis can cost more than $80 a gram. But supply is also an issue, and the Army isn't fulfilling the demand. Quote, the Army alone is not enough, said Andrea Triscoglio, a 39-year-old who suffers from multiple sclerosis. We need to make it easier for others to grow medical cannabis. simple solution. Just let people grow their own medical cannabis at home. I don't see why that would be a problem. In 2012, Italian cannabis patients unsuccessfully pushed for government's allowance to grow their own. Domestic medical marijuana consumption in Italy is as high as 1,000 pounds per year. Even with the sharp uptick in production, there's still a sharp deficit that leads cannabis consumers pursuing other less legal means like sourcing their product from illicit sources their counterparts in the U.S. already stamp out. Yeah, let these people grow, man. Come on. Um, Take the burden off the military. Although it sounds like probably the coolest mission that you could possibly put the military on in any country is to have them grow weed. So as legalization happens, from time to time you hear this argument pop up from governments that are faced with legalizing marijuana, which is such a daunting task. I mean, come on. You have to figure out all these different ways in which you don't have to arrest people anymore. Oh, wait a minute. I'm sorry. This is legalization, not ending prohibition. When you legalize marijuana, sometimes you create more ways to arrest people. And it all falls down on the regulations and what the penalties are for not following the regulations. And there's always the idea that there's going to be people that aren't going to be in the regulated market that still are going to try to participate to some degree in, the industry. And whether or not they get caught and when they do get caught, what the penalties are is all dependent on, how hard prohibition's actually getting rolled back. Saskatchewan is bracing itself for the cost of legalized marijuana, something that would be eased by the recent announcement that provinces would keep 75% of revenues from the drug. And a lot of times they write it right into the laws that the police unions or the police themselves somehow get extra money. Like they get a percentage cut right out of the top. Like, here, you guys can have some money. And I mean, it's like, for what? To pay people to retire early, I hope. No, that's not even it, guys. The upfront costs, of course, the initial and most obvious, the regulatory regime. The provincial finance minister, Donna Harpur, referring to the actual regulations of the drug. Quote, the other initial upfront cost that I think is going to come quite quickly is on the policing side. We may, in all likelihood, need a larger police force in order to police this. The federal government introduced legislation to legalize marijuana in Canada earlier this year. It's expected that pot will be legal in July of 2018. While the federal government handles the legality of the drug, it'll be up to the provinces to handle the details surrounding its regulation and distribution. The province has experienced a lack of interest in selling weed itself, preferring to regulate the drug instead. Another issue will be the legal age to purchase pot, something which may have to wait until Saskatchewan Party chooses a new prime minister in the new year, Harpur said. While prices vary, black market pot is usually priced around $10 a gram. Federal Finance Minister Bill Morneau has said pricing will be competitive around $10 a gram as well. Ultimately, if we are going to drive out the black market, we have to underprice the black market price, Harpur said. I say to that, don't forget to also make sure the quality is good. The revenue going to the federal government would be capped at $100 million per year, according to Harpur. Anything over that would go to provinces and their territories, she said. It is projected that weed will bring in $400 million in revenue annually. Oh boy. So you get like 75% of the taxes from that revenue or something like that. And you still can't figure out how to sideline the police in this and do some kind of other way to enforce regulations or codes or whatever you want to call it. This is happening time and time again, place after place. Let's see what Jody Emery has to say about this shit.
If this is legalization, Justin Trudeau and the Liberal government lied to the Canadian people. This is a new form of prohibition. This is worse than anything we saw under the Harper government. I think Canadians should immediately call Justin Trudeau, John Tory, and Bill Blair and ask why we're seeing more people being harmed under their so-called legalization than we ever saw under Stephen Harper's anti-marijuana policies. This is about protecting the corporate profits of stock market businesses who have sent the police to arrest peaceful people to protect their own financial interests. That is sick and disgusting and despicable. Shame on the Toronto Police Service and shame on the Toronto City government for harming peaceful people. Because if you have 50 complaints, 50 complaints, you have 50,000 sick people last night who were stressed and sick, and their doctor says, no, I won't give you medical marijuana. The doctors in this country are not providing access, and that's why dispensaries have become so popular, because the people demand it. It's public support for peaceful transactions. There's no coercion, there's no force. These dispensaries do no harm. The only harm being done in association with dispensaries is the harm of patients being made to suffer and the harm of peaceful citizens being given criminal records. The police are the biggest gang with guns that went and shut down peaceful businesses. That needs to be questioned. Who called for this? It was not the general public.
Okay, now that was an old video about stuff that happened previously in Canada, like last year, the dispensary raids in Toronto and whatnot. But still, what the point is that that's the kind of legalization that we're looking at in some regards, but you know, it's going to be really curious. We got to watch California close because I've seen reports coming out of California that aren't looking too cool. You know, we're looking at possibly, you know, like some kind of crackdown on people that have been growing weed for generations in some cases. All right, back to Canada. First Nations in Canada want more control over legalized marijuana. Canada's First Nations are demanding the right to regulate the sale and distribution of recreational marijuana in their communities, and some near urban areas want to adopt more business-friendly rules to create jobs and earn revenue. Chiefs representing some 630 reserves at the Assembly of First Nations last week were in general agreement that they, and not federal and provincial governments, should be the ones to set the rules on marijuana retail and the use in their communities, the Globe and Mail reported. Residents of First Nations are exempt from taxation, including on tobacco products. It is expected that they will be extended to recreational and medical marijuana that same exemption. However, when First Nations will be allowed to play whether First Nations will be allowed to play by their own rules when it comes to cannabis is still an open question, and it's one that courts may ultimately have to decide. The Assembly formed a committee on the legalization of marijuana led by Ontario Regional Chief Isidore Day and Quebec Regional Chief Ghislaine Picard. Day said some communities may not feel that they are bound to abide by rules imposed by the provincial government, including on age and distribution frameworks. Oneida Nation of Thames, for example, is home to a marijuana dispensary, and the people who run it do not believe they need a license, Chief Randall Phillips said. Quote, "We will decide who gets it. We will decide how it gets distributed," he said. Some chiefs are calling on the government to delay legalization. Well, good luck with that. And people have been calling on Canada to delay this legalization since Trudeau got in office. And it's, you know, it's been dragging on for a while. Let's just get it over with, all right? We'll figure out who will be ready for what and what you're going to do in your region with your area. And the tribes are no different, you know. They have an agreement with the Canadian governments. Every province has an agreement also, and all these agreements, need to be respected, man. And if you say that they're allowed to make their own laws within the tribe, on tribal territory, then that's got to be what's going on, right? All right, back to America. Um, so we had that secret meeting that Sessions had. We're going to talk about that a little bit more. I did a video about it. I mentioned it on the last weekly clip, and then right after that clip, I did a video kind of detailing the people that were at the thing. So this is an opinion piece. I don't usually read too many of these. And another thing I don't like to do lately is read anything from Newsweek because they have become just garbage in the last like 2 years. And they do push reefer madness, but all of a sudden I'm starting to see them kind of bouncing back and forth. So I don't know if it's because they got a fuller staff of reefer writers or what's going on. But whatever the case is, this is Ryan Gentleman. I don't know who that is, but let's go ahead and read it. Congress just gave. Well, let me try to figure out who this is real quick again. I have no indication. And this is the only article they got up in here. So, I mean, it is an opinion piece. I don't have any context as to who this person is. So it's kind of important to know who the opinion is that you're reading. But what is this about? Sessions and Christie must stop telling lies about marijuana. I think the reason I pulled this is because I'm just looking for somebody else to just sympathize with me. And somewhat the mainstream media, is Newsweek even that anymore? I doubt it, but people do take it seriously. I mean, it's like that saying, like, or that meme you might have seen where it says, "Oh, it's not true unless I seen it on CNN or read it in the New York Times or something." And it's like the tree does it. Do you hear it if you're not there? When you hear a tree falling in the woods, what if you're not there? Does it make the noise? And it's a dumb thing to think of, but I just want to hear somebody from the real news or whatever you want to call it, which they're all faker than the ones that are fake news these days. And who knows? Who knows what's real and what's not? You got to look at every story, and then you got to like chuck out the bullshit that they add to it. And then when you get down to the bare bones, is just the story, that's about it, man. Like, you never get an opinion from the people delivering news these days. They have absolutely, they think it's cooler to have no bias at all whatsoever. Even though they do, even though, they'll sit there and pretend like they have no bias while they deliver the specific story, but they got the bias overall. And it's kind of obvious. Okay, let me just read this opinion because maybe that is in line with what we were talking about. Congress just gave the Rohrabacher-Blumenauer Amendment, which bars the Department of Justice from using federal funds to prosecute people buying or selling medical marijuana in states that have legalized it, a temporary reprieve until December 22nd. However, as Representative Earl Blumenauer from Oregon stated, quote, 2 weeks is not enough, certainly, especially when you're talking about patients' well-being and a North American cannabis marketplace largely made up of small business owners and their employees that is expected to grow 33% to nearly $10 billion in 2017 and create tens of thousands of new jobs in the new year. A recent Gallup poll revealed support for legalizing marijuana is at the highest it's been since the question was first asked in the U.S. in 1969. The poll showed a 4-point uptick from a year ago, with 64% of Americans supporting legalizing marijuana for medical and adult use. In addition to Democrats or independents supporting legalization, Republicans for the first time backed fully legalizing cannabis, a plant found to be far less harmful than alcohol and tobacco, two federally legal substances under U.S. law. However, despite widespread bipartisan support for legalization and the positive impacts cannabis has had on patients, U.S. Attorney Jeff Sessions seems set on launching another failed federal war on drugs campaign and cracking down on states that have partially or completely legalized marijuana use. Sessions' misguided approach are mirrored by an equally disturbing misinformation effort by the chairman of the Trump administration's Commission on Combating Drug Addiction and the Opioid Crisis, the unpopular New Jersey governor, Christie. In the fall, Christie released a letter announcing recommendations made by the Opioid Commission, and at the event announcing these recommendations, he calls supporters of marijuana legalization crazy liberals who wanted to poison our kids. Christie went on to compare medical marijuana laws to the overprescribing of opioids that led to the current epidemic. And I said to that, are you fucking kidding me, Christie? People are literally dying every time you switch the channel from one news channel to the other every 40 minutes or so. Quicker than that, there's a newborn baby born addicted to opioids. Many Americans and healthcare professionals were equally shocked and angered by the Commission's report and Christie's remarks. In fact, Dr. Chenazo Cunningham, a professor of medicine at the Albert Einstein College of Medicine that conducted the first long-term study on medical marijuana's impact on opioid use for pain, stated to CNN, I was surprised to see negative language about marijuana in the opioid report. Research that examines pain and marijuana shows that marijuana use significantly reduces pain. In addition, the majority of studies examining marijuana and opioids show that marijuana use is associated with less opioid use and less opioid-related deaths. You know what Christie's kind of reminded me of with this just totally throwing all these comments to the wind that Normal put together, like 12,000 comments to talk about how we can use cannabis to help the opioid epidemic in a couple of different ways. And the main two themes, it seemed to me, was one, you could prescribe people cannabinoids for pain in the first damn place, and they'll never get hooked on deadly opioids ever to begin with. Or number two, if someone's hooked on deadly ass opioids, you could actually use cannabis as a way for them to try to get out of the addiction. And it has been proven to work both ways. And it's not for everyone. I'm not saying it's some kind of magic fucking bullet. Like, I like to guard my rhetoric a little bit from going out of control. And like I say sometimes, like I will use some over-the-top rhetoric when I'm going against over-the-top rhetoric. So when you're Christie and you're like, no, this shit is garbage, it just makes people get more addicted to heroin and do more heroin, and it's going to cause more overdoses if you legalize it because more people will end up doing heroin. If you say some over-the-top shit like that, I'm going to come hard back at you. I'm going to be like, yo, fuck you, dude. I have 5 patients. And all 5 of my patients have quit doing opioid pain pills because of medical marijuana. All 5 of them, and myself included. But, I've been on that for a long time. And we talk about what's going on with the VA and how they're talking to people about recommending, cannabis in states for PTSD and all this other stuff. I told my VA doctors way back in the 90s, like, yo, I'm not doing this Vicodin fucking thing. I got my whole life ahead of me. I ain't got time to lay around fucking fucked up on Vicodins and whatever else is after that for the rest of my life. So, cannabis helped me then, but it wasn't medicinal that, the cannabis wasn't as potent, but it was pretty potent. But I don't think that really has anything to do with it. I think the big thing is the frequency of getting the good medical grade potency, as well as, just being able to know the varieties that you're working with, Like way back then, you were lucky to get a sativa, or, you know, you didn't know what it was going to be, but if you got it, you were just happy that it was good shit. So I'm kind of getting on a sidetrack here, but whatever. Let's get back to this guy's opinion. On the other hand, the opioid epidemic, which was largely sparked by quadrupling of federally legal doctor-prescribed painkillers such as OxyContin and Vicodin since 1999, caused 59,000 deaths due to overdoses in 2016, according to a recent investigation by the New York Times. Hey, so, and we know it's real because it's the New York Times. Ha ha ha. Gotcha. That couldn't have been no Russians, right? Tragically, this makes deaths from the opioids the leading cause of death in America for people under the age of 50. Unfortunately, having lost loved ones to the nation's opioid crisis, I think everyone agrees we must do everything we can to address our failed drug policies. And you know, these people like Christie and these sacks of shit like Sessions, they are not being intellectually honest, and they're being intellectually immature by taking the position they're taking, throwing the science to the wind like, fuck this shit. We don't care about that. And that's, you know, that's why I say that this guy, this reminds me of Chris Christie reminds me of Richard Nixon himself. It's like, in the face of all this evidence, you know, Nixon he told the top people in his cabinet to put together some research marijuana, look into it, tell me exactly, you know, the dangers of that stuff. They came back with a report that said it was basically the safest thing that people are fucking with. And meanwhile, his buddy over on the other side was like, but dude, that's the only way we're gonna fucking put these hippies and these blacks down, man, is if we you know, if we can just arrest them for marijuana. It's the only way we're gonna be able to arrest our enemies. So he fucking threw the paper or the report in the shredder and went ahead with Schedule 1. That's how it happened, guys. And this is what this looks like. They're like, whoa, no, we're still going on the Nixon protocol, man. Throw that shit in the garbage. He threw away over 12,000 comments talking about how people know for a fact that cannabis helped them get away from opioids or not do them in the first place. All right, so however, we shouldn't tolerate lies about cannabis and successful approaches to fairly license, tax, regulate, and enforce the plant. We also shouldn't accept Christie's and Sessions' failed war on drugs rhetoric, which only appears to be filled with personal ideologies and void of any sound supporting data and scientific facts as a viable drug reforms for our country. We can and must do better. The truth is, science years ago discredited the idea that cannabis is a gateway drug, and the scientific research increasingly shows that access to medical marijuana can help decrease rates of opioid addiction and death. And when these guys are being intellectually dishonest and immature about this argument, people are fucking dying. People in states that don't even have medical marijuana. People, you know, I don't know, Alabama, Kentucky, Tennessee, Georgia. I don't know. I mean, Ohio is coming around, but it's still pretty messed up there as far as access to medical marijuana and even, you know, legitimate, like, worrying about getting busted and shit. Like, you know, they're not taking it seriously enough either. So the 2015 National Bureau of Economic Research analysis found states with medical cannabis laws saw as much as a 35% drop in substance abuse treatment admissions and 31% reduction in opioid overdoses. A report issued this year by the Drug and Alcohol Dependence also found that states with legalized medical cannabis programs saw an average drop in opioid use of 23% in states after legalizing medical cannabis. In this era of alternative facts and misinformation, it is critical that Americans hold elected and appointed officials like Christie and Sessions accountable for making statements masked of facts as facts. They don't care. And they tell you that you need to have more science, and they tell you that your science needs to be specific. Like it has to be FDA approved weed that gets tested from NIDA and all this dumb garbage bullshit. Oh, it's on Schedule 1. You're not allowed to test it anyway. Bullshit. They tell you. It's ridiculous. Why? If our nation is serious about recognizing the factors that led to its opioid crisis and failed war on drugs practices, we can no longer tolerate reefer madness scare tactics as a viable policy approaches. Rather, we should come together to call on Congress to act and put an end to this cycle of uncertainty and permanently protect state medical marijuana programs and adult use from federal interference. Hear, hear, I second that. So that's what people are talking about. That's somebody's opinion. Ryan Gentleman, and rightfully, that's the opinion that basically everybody should be having. How are we still here with marijuana? How are we letting them get away with this intellectual dishonesty that they're doing? And most of all, how are we still funding this DEA effort to eradicate marijuana and to, basically shut marijuana down? How is that still getting funded? $20 billion a year or so. All right, so you want to know what went on at that secret meeting, huh? Well, when I told you the dossier of these people that were at the meeting, when I laid that out for you, that basically gave you like a pretty good idea of what the hell they were going to be talking about, because each person was like a superhero in a superhero movie. Each one of them has their own special reefer madness area of expertise, we'll say. And this is pretty much confirming that. So last week, U.S. Attorney General Jeff Sessions, and again, I'm reading from a Tom Angel article, and you'll see me do this time and time again. And on this particular weekly show, I'm seeing at least 4, maybe 5 of them. 4 from the marijuana moment for sure, and maybe 1 from Forbes, maybe somewhere else. It's not me ripping you off, Tom. This is just a testament to how good you are at doing this and how much material you have out there that is relevant and needs to be covered, needs to be disseminated more so. So I again urge my audience, and I will put a link in the description to Tom's Patreon page. But I encourage my audience to contribute to Tom Angel. If you do contribute to people that you support as YouTubers or as anybody that, Patreon isn't just for YouTubers. So basically, to help support me, you'd be supporting me if you supported Tom. If something happened to Tom and he couldn't go to work, he couldn't do this anymore, there definitely would be consequences down the line. So here we go. Last week, Attorney General Jeff Sessions held a behind closed doors meeting about marijuana with anti-legalization activists. Activists, I like that. Now, thanks to the fact that Sessions inadvertently showed an agenda for the meeting to a TV camera that was in the room to capture introductions along with some high-tech sleuthing, we know what prohibitionists discussed in the secret after reporters were kicked out. And this is like the 3rd secret meeting that Sessions has had with people that obviously have an agenda to continue prohibition. We'll just say that. So a Twitter user with the handle Mental Motion was able to enhance a screen capture of the document that Marijuana Moment posted. And there you have it right here. Let's see, well, no, Sessions was like walking through saying hi to people, and he had this in his hand. Document appeared to read Agenda Bertha Madra's marijuana is not suitable for opiates as a pain medication. Now, remember, she had the slides where basically it said, if your mom smokes marijuana while you're in the womb, you'll be born, and then later on down the line in life, you're going to do heroin. So Dr. Hoover Agger, I'm not sure if I profiled him or the Dr. Evans guy. Now, there was some people from Heritage that I didn't really do anything to because I didn't know that they were going to be speaking or whatever. So this person says that the harm from today's marijuana. Okay. Today's marijuana, that's that famous, today's marijuana is not your dad's marijuana. It's so much more potent, and that's supposed to scare people, I guess. I don't know what the fuck that never seemed to me to be like a scaring point, or like it's not like, I mean, pretty much basically anybody, even somebody that has very little understanding of marijuana and has only heard reefer madness, might still understand that point is just to be ignored. Like, what do you mean? It's not like you can overdose on it. Pretty much everybody knows that. You know why? Because nobody knows anybody that fucking has. Then you have Bob DuPont, Dr. Bob. He was the one that worked as a consultant at that teen rehab center where they basically tortured kids that were in there, and it was all kinds of abuse and torture. So we know this guy's a piece of shit. We know these people are all just sketchy, old, crusty dinosaurs that need to crawl back into their fucking tar pits and go away, is what they need to do. They were gone for a long fucking time. I mean, they were still there, but they weren't really making this much noise. Then all of a sudden, Sessions came back, and he's like the Pied fucking Piper, man, calling these fucking rats back to town. This DuPont guy, he's going to tell you about the effects of marijuana on drug driving. Now, this guy writes books about marijuana, or about drug testing. He wants to drug test everybody from, just everybody that goes to school, to everybody that goes to jail, to everybody that goes to rehab, or wherever else you go. If you go somewhere, you should get drug tested. That's what his books talk about. This guy here, Dave Evans, the role that the Food and Drug Administration can and should, blah, 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 blah. Maybe that's some kind of thing talking about what the FDA should be doing in the legalization vein, like as marijuana is obviously going to get legalized one way or another. What should the FDA do? What can they do? Some blah, 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 the organizations you can speak for and what you and they are, blah, 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 people from recreational marijuana use. We can only speculate that means organizations that you can speak for and what you and they are, what they can do to dissuade people from recreational marijuana use. I don't know, something like, something to the effect of what kind of things, and this sounds like it could be one of the church-based things or something like that. I don't know. And then blah, 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 law enforcement thinks of the commercialization, blah, 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 law enforcement would support an enforcement initiative. All right, so this might say something like, and then this person's going to talk about what law enforcement thinks of the commercialization of, recreational marijuana or whatever. And then law enforcement would support an enforcement initiative. Maybe they're talking about something where, hey, like I was saying earlier, oh, we need somebody to be the code enforcers. And, hey, the cops can already, bust somebody that aren't following the rules. Here we have blah, 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 course of marijuana commercialization in the states if the blah, blah, blah not intervene. And maybe that is some kind of a prediction scenario of what kind of marijuana commercialization is going to occur if the federal government does not intervene. Maybe they're talking about further legalization, or what the legalization that already has happened is going to do as far as revenue and other things. I'm sure it doesn't have anything to do with like teen use is going to blow up. See, these guys aren't talking about their talking points of reefer madness. Except for she is. Marijuana is not a substitute for opioids as a painkiller. That's because they're trying to counter those comments that Christie got over at the Opioid Commission. And then, of course, this guy's coming in with the drug driving because that's their new main thing to lean on. They're like, even if marijuana is legalized, we still got the drug driving. You know, he's sitting around talking to his police buddies and shit. And here we have Tom Angel tweeting out, reaching out, looking for somebody to enhance the screen grab of the agenda here. And then somebody must have said, hey, I'll do that shit. And yeah, this is a mental motion. He did that shit. In attendance, I already read all this before, but I'm just going to go over it for anybody that didn't watch that video. It was pretty long. Not that, I mean, if you like long videos, I guess you might have seen it. In attendance, according to the video, the opening introductions captured by a pool photographer and posted by C-SPAN were Edwin Meese III, U.S. Attorney General under Ronald Reagan, big prohibitionist; Kevin Sabat, President and CEO of Smart Approaches to Marijuana, biggest prohibitionist; Big Bertha Madras, a former Office of National Drug Control Policy staffer and member of President Trump's Commission on combating drug addiction and the opioid crisis. So she's the one that has her whole agenda is to tell you that marijuana is not a substitute for opioid painkillers. Isn't that interesting? And she's in charge of the Commission on Combating Drug Addiction and the Opioid Crisis. So she's like, you know what? One of the things you better not fucking do is try to use weed as a replacement for pain. How can you tell somebody what fucking works or don't work for their pain? By the way, you fucker, where the fuck do you get the gall to tell somebody that they shouldn't use marijuana as a substitute for opioids as a pain medication? That's not only just irresponsible, it's recklessly endangering irresponsible. Just to even have just to stand there and talk about that in front of anybody. First of all, what are you, nanny? Are you the nanny? Is this fucking, are you my babysitter or my mom or some shit? What gives you the right? At what the fuck point in time did you think it was your right to impose that kind of thing on somebody, to tell them what they can or can't use for pain management? Are you fucking serious? What is your talking point, Bertha Madras? Marijuana is not a substitute for opiates as pain medication. Really? And you're on President Trump's Commission on Combating Drug Addiction and the Opioid Crisis. It doesn't surprise me because, like everywhere else, Trump finds the person that's got to be like the absolute worst person you could possibly find for the job, and he puts them on it. So it doesn't surprise me there. Robert DuPont, former director of the National Institute on Drug Abuse, one of the first. David Evans, executive director of Drug Free Schools Coalition. And Dr. Hoover Ager from Johns Hopkins. Quote, I think it's a big issue for America, for the country, and I'm of the general view that this is not a healthy substance. Then you need to fucking educate yourself, Sessions, you dumb little fucking elf. Hey, you dumbass. Just because you think that something's not a healthy substance based on your deep south, like right-wing bullshit, that doesn't mean fuck all. All right? And you're the dumbest fucker in the United States to keep out, going out there and talking this talking point. When literally cannabis is one of the most healthy substances that we have. All right? It literally has fucking antioxidants in it. Sessions said at the beginning of the gathering, quote, I think that's pretty clear. And then have the policy response that we and the federal government needs to be prepared to take and do so appropriately and with good sense. More like he's trying to cunningly and brazenly figure out a way that they can come and do some chops real quick to try to throw a fucking wrench in the machine because that's all they got. And that's what this one thing up here was, where you see this where it says, you know, course of marijuana commercialization in the states if the blank did not intervene. They want to throw a wrench in there. That's all they care about. Let's throw a wrench in and see if we can't slow it down and chug it down a few notches to where people are afraid to stick their heads out. And it's not going to fucking work, dude. And I can tell you why it ain't going to work. Because I got a story coming up, man. How Colorado ain't going to let it happen. I'm pretty sure California ain't going to let you come and kick in shit. And there's ways that they can make sure you don't. I appreciate the opportunity to hear your analysis on marijuana and some of the related issues. Sessions told the group, I do believe I am, and I'm afraid that the public is not properly educated on some of the issues related to marijuana. Here we go again. How the fuck do you think you come to that conclusion, Sessions? Because you see what people are talking about and you see what people are learning about cannabis, and you're like, oh no, oh shit, these guys aren't properly educated. They must, maybe we should teach them from the Bible about marijuana. Or what? What the fuck are you even talking about, man? We're properly educated on marijuana. You're the one that's ignorant. There's you're either educated or you're ignorant. There isn't a proper education. When you put the word properly in there, that just automatically sounds like you're talking about your fucking reefer madness bullshit propaganda. You're like, oh, the public isn't like, they don't believe our reefer madness anymore. Well, we'll fix them. We'll fucking beat it into them is what it sounds like you're fucking saying. But unfortunately, you're just a little fucking, you know, like, I don't even know, man. You're way too old to be on this warpath, dude. And you don't have any fucking political capital. You got zero. You stick your head out and do this shit, you're going to be the laughing stock of the country. No way is anybody going to fucking put up with this shit. 90% of the country that has been polled said, fuck you, don't even try it. So, goodbye. Have a nice day and go fuck off. And back to he's saying, and that would be a matter that we could, all of us together, maybe be helpful in working on, and that would allow better policy to actually be enacted. Dude, this isn't romper room sessions, you fucking moron. Just because you put together this stupid dream team of idiots that's going to go out there and spew fucking a pack of lies doesn't mean it's going to change anybody's mind. Doesn't mean anybody's going to believe you. They're just going to be like me and they're going to fucking laugh at you and then tell you the real facts because you guys don't have them. You know how I can tell? Because this fucking lady is trying to tell me what kind of fucking medicine to use for my pain. Fuck you, Bertha. It's the dumbest thing I ever heard of in my life. Marijuana cannot be used as a substitute for opioid pain medications, blah, blah, blah. Who the fuck are... What? Did you know that 90% of the people that use medical marijuana use it for pain? And that 90% of them say it fucking works better than opioids? 6 out of 9 people would prefer medical marijuana over opioids if they ran into a situation where they had pain. Like, you know, an injury or, you know, a car wreck or getting a tooth pulled. Anyway. The 22nd is right around the corner, guys. We'll see what happens after that with the medical marijuana protections, but I'm guessing he's going to have just as hard of a time going after medical marijuana as recreational. And like I said, their guns are aiming at medical, so keep an eye out. That's what they're aiming their guns at. That's the indications I got. And that's from my observation of that lady talking about medical marijuana, talking shit about it, the FDA talking shit about it, and everybody else. Meanwhile, lawmakers press Trump health official on marijuana as opioid alternative. A bipartisan group of members of Congress is pushing the Trump administration to consider medical marijuana as a safer alternative to opioids. Quote, as you know, our country is grappling with an opioid epidemic that is now taking 91 lives every single day, the lawmakers wrote in a letter according to Health and Human Services Secretary Eric Hargan. Recent studies published by qualified academic research suggest that marijuana may prove to be a useful alternative treatment for chronic pain instead of harmful addictive prescription opioids, and that marijuana may reduce the overall number of opioid overdose deaths. After citing a number of studies demonstrating cannabis's efficacy on that legal marijuana access is associated with reduced opioid issues, the House members lay out a series of questions they want answered. The evidence that marijuana may have a positive therapeutic warrants additional attention from the federal government. We request that you provide answers to the following questions. 1. Please describe in detail what the Department of Health and Human Services is doing to fill the gap in our knowledge about the use, uptake, and effectiveness of medical marijuana as an alternative to opioids for pain treatment in states where it's legal. And we don't want to hear from Bertha Madres about that fucking issue. Please, thank you. A, please describe in detail any federal efforts to conduct research, the impact state medical and recreational marijuana laws on opioid overdose deaths. And B, please also describe in detail efforts by other federal agencies under the jurisdiction of Health and Human Services. Question 2, please describe in detail what Health and Human Services and other federal agencies are doing to work with states that have implemented medical marijuana laws to collect data on the impact of these laws on opioid overdose deaths. Wouldn't that be nice? Gee, it seems like the Department of Health and Human Services would want to fucking do something like that, or would already be on it. I mean, at the worst, it's like, hey, you got people over here at fucking NIDA and other government agencies and, you know, DOJ and all these other places talking shit about how marijuana is dangerous and that it's going to hurt people and it's a public health crisis problem or some shit. I don't even know what the fuck they classify it as with their scare tactics. But it's like, it seems like you guys would want to know some numbers about the efficacy, about the how many people get it for what, and is it helping, and all this other shit. Instead, you just sit back and act like, you know, what you think in your mind is what's really going on. That's what these fuckers in the government always do. So is HHS committed to implementing evidence-based policies regarding the use of medical marijuana as an alternative pain treatment in the effort to promote public health? Not if Bertha Madres is on the case. Is HHS committed to making any research on the therapeutic benefits of marijuana available to the states, including as a more benign alternative to opioids for pain management, so they can implement evidence-based policies to address the opioid epidemic? It's almost as if these guys are writing a blueprint on how to fucking, you know, use marijuana as a tool in the opioid epidemic. It's like, hey, you guys, you know, you had your commission and you did your shit, but you didn't come up with anything good. In fact, you shit all over marijuana when it's actually helping people. So here, we got some ideas for you. Please describe in any detail any ongoing efforts to share this research on marijuana's potential as an alternative pain treatment to addictive and dangerous prescription medications with other federal agencies, including but not limited to the Office of National Drug Control Policy, the Drug Enforcement Administration, and the Department of Justice. Oh yeah, the people I just talked about. Yeah, they for sure need to get the memo, all right? Because they all act like they don't know how to talk to each other, and nobody knows that the federal government has fucking patents on the efficacy of medical marijuana. So, yeah, man, why don't you guys just all get together in the same room one day, maybe, and kind of chat it out? Quote, we should not ignore any information that suggests there may be a tool available to fight the opioid epidemic that we are not using to the fullest extent. The legislators conclude in the letter, which is dated Tuesday, quote, while it is clear that more research is necessary, it is equally clear that medical marijuana is an alternative pain treatment that merits the attention of the federal government. Congresswoman Tulsi Gabbard, from Hawaii, posted a series of tweets about the issue on Thursday evening. And she posted, members of Congress call on HHS governor to allow research of medical marijuana as pain management alternative to opioids. As the opioid epidemic continues to ravage communities across the country, we must pursue every available path to prevent, treat, and ultimately end America's reliance on these highly addictive drugs. In Hawaii alone, hospitalizations, emergency room visits, and opioid-related deaths have doubled over the last decade. Studies have found a correlation in states that have legalized medical marijuana with a drop in addiction rates and opioid abuse deaths, some over 20%. And we have a story out of Michigan that I'm going to reveal in a little bit that also talks about that in Michigan. With 91 lives lost every single day to the opioid epidemic, Acting Secretary Hargan should immediately authorize additional research into medical marijuana as an alternative treatment to urgently address this opioid crisis. The letter comes amid increasingly prominent discussion about marijuana's potential to reduce opioid overdoses. The federal government's top health research official was asked about the topic in 2 separate hearings this week. Last week, Senator Elizabeth Warren, Democrat from Massachusetts, sent questions about marijuana and opioids to Alex Azar, President Trump's nominee for HHS Secretary. And let's see here. Yeah, she cites recent studies, including the 2014 Journal of American Medical Association's internal medicine study that analyzed all 50 states and found that those with medical marijuana laws had a 25% fewer fatal opioid overdoses than states that had no such laws between 1999 and 2010. Now these, I probably ran through these before, but I'm just going to do it again because this is to put this in perspective, man. The federal government knows about this shit. And for Christie to fucking come out there with his intellectually fucking, like, completely dishonest and completely immature attitude, quite frankly. He's a bully. Christie's a fucking bully. He comes out there and he just yells at people about his position, in which is basically just rooted in pure reefer madness. You know, this guy's rhetoric about marijuana is so over the top that nobody even bothers to deal with it. They're just like, whatever, dude. Like, you're just an idiot. You know, obviously you don't know anything about self-control, so like it would even matter, you know. So, Health Affairs study published last year looked at Medicare Part D prescribing data and found that with the implementation of state medical marijuana laws among prescriptions for pain, there was a reduction of 1,826 daily doses filled per prescriber per year. The same study also found that due to implemented medical marijuana laws, Medicare Part D savings were over $165 million among 17 states in the District of Columbia in 2013. I wonder what that Medicare Part D doesn't cover. Oh yeah, medical marijuana. A 2016 Journal of Pain survey of chronic pain patients found that among participants there was some suggested benefit to medical marijuana use, such as fewer side effects to medication, a 64% reduction in overall opioid use, and improved quality of life among half the patients. A report released in January 2017 by the National Academies of Sciences, Engineering, and Medicine compiled research from over 10,000 studies on marijuana and its components. The report states that in adults with chronic pain, patients who are treated with cannabis or cannabinoids are more likely to experience a clinically significant reduction in pain symptoms. This report also concluded that, quote, there is substantial evidence that cannabis is an effective treatment for chronic pain in adults. The evidence that marijuana may have positive therapeutic warrants additional attention from the federal government. We request that you provide answers to the following questions. And that's the questions we read earlier. We should not ignore any information that suggests there may be a tool. Yeah, we read that too. So this was signed by several members of Congress, including the Cannabis Caucus that we see here. This is pretty much all the members that I know of. You might want to look at to see if your favorite congressman that represents you is on this list, because mine's not. None of my representatives from Michigan are aboard with this. I've called and well, this is different. This is just this letter here. So talking about, hey, and I'm talking about Steve Amish, I think, in Michigan, who just signed on to one of the marijuana bills as a co-sponsor. But I'm not sure what one it is. I'm not going to, try to figure that out. But bottom line is, like, I'm in Michigan. None of my representatives signed this letter. It's kind of a big deal, dude. There's kind of an opioid epidemic kind of in Michigan. And medical marijuana laws that they are in Michigan, access is iffy at best in some areas, especially up north, where the opioid epidemic is hitting people the hardest per capita. So I don't know. We'll see. I said it on the outset when Trump appointed Christie to this opioid commission bullshit that this shit is going to be a fucking disaster. More people are going to die, not less. And they're just going to fucking use this opioid epidemic as a way to go after marijuana again. Like a drug war reboot. Drug war 3.0. And another Tom Angel story, 3 in a row. Hey, man, if you like Tom Angel, definitely hit his Patreon up. And if you like me, you can't support me yet because I don't have a Patreon yet. I don't really think I'm not doing this enough to be like, hey, man, pay me. But I am saying a lot. So there's that. That's the only reason I may actually someday say, hey, man, I'm going to need some incentive to keep doing this shit, guys. Teen marijuana use down in most legalized states, federal data says. This goes out to all you prohibitionists out there that like to keep pushing this point that teen use is going to go up, especially when you legalize marijuana. And they keep talking about Colorado and Washington and how teen use has gone up. And they say it and they say it and they say it because they're hoping that it's going to make, somebody freak out. Like, holy shit, teen use has really gone up. And then you look at the numbers that they had. And the teen use that they're talking about, it went up from like 14 people to 17 one year. And then it was actually there was a decrease. And then it went up, it bumped back up to 13 from 11 or some shit. And this isn't anything new. These numbers always do that. It's called fluctuation of data. There's a lot of reasons for it. It's because you don't have that good of ways to get this data. That's what my opinion is. When you say that, 17 out of 100 teens said, yeah, I smoked weed last week. I don't believe that you fucking know what the fuck you're talking about. How do you know that? You act like you're spying on every single person and you can be like, oh yeah, we know this is the exact numbers. So I've never really believed these stupid ass numbers. But apparently these numbers are, something that the federal government looks at and they decide to do things on it. And this is what not Chris Christie, but Jeff Sessions' little crackdown is determined by the Cole memo, and the Cole memo specifically has these guidelines in it that states that have legalized medical marijuana. What are they doing? Are they doing the best job that they can to prevent teen use and to prevent the marijuana that they have legalized in their state from getting out of their state and going to a state that isn't legalized? Is there a bunch of people crashing into shit because of marijuana smoking and driving? And these are all the things that sessions people have to look at to determine whether it's going to be worth it for them, because legalizing marijuana apparently created some kind of public health issue that demands the federal government crack down on it, which is just, oh my God. Did you hear all that? That sounds fucking obscenely crazy. Like, what? First of all, if there was so much haywire shit going on, like teen youth shooting through the fucking roof and people crashing into shit constantly, or whatever else, we wouldn't be like hearing it from fucking Kevin Sabat, all right? We'd be seeing it on the damn TV all the time. They'd be talking about all these crazy new things that's happening in Colorado because they legalize weed. But guess what, guys? Nothing fucking changed. And if anything, kids these days are a lot less interested in that marijuana stuff or cannabis or what, you know, they don't even care about it. And it's way more technical than it was when kids were ignorant to it, you know? And there's way more to know about it because there's more knowledge that people know about it. We've learned a lot. We've come a long ways from when you could get away with fucking stupid ass commercials on TV talking about this is your brain on drugs, and then you throw an egg in a frying pan. So, contrary to fears raised by marijuana opponents, teen use of cannabis is trending downward in most states that have legalized it for adult use. According to the new data from federally funded National Survey on Drug Use and Health, NSDUH, the percentage of Colorado teens who use marijuana in the past year is down more than 2 points in 2015-16 version of the study as compared to the 2014-2015 edition. Sorry. The same is true in Washington State. In Washington, D.C., the drop was nearly 3 points. And I'm not going to give that much credit, just like I didn't give it credit when it went up 3 points. Like I said, these are just fluctuations. I predict overall, when you look at a 10-year run, the teen use is going to go down. You know why I know that? Because that's what happened in Amsterdam when they legalized. That's what happened in Portugal when they legalized. That's what happens when you legalize. Teen use goes down because they no longer give a fuck about this shit. And there is something to be said about now it's at the store where you have to be a certain age and you got to show an ID and all this shit. And it's just, you know, whether you like it or not, that does make it a little bit harder for teens to get. And, you know, when you got right wingers, they always like to say, well, the laws are not going to prevent somebody from doing something. Well, no shit. But they kind of actually do, because the fear of getting busted actually deters most people from doing something that's illegal. I mean, most people don't want to do something that's illegal. Now, when you're saying marijuana being illegal, most people are thinking that's probably not a very just law, and I should definitely be a true American and purposely not obey that bullshit. So let's look at the damn numbers. So annual teen cannabis use is also down across the U.S. as a whole, but the drop was less significant than that experienced in Colorado and Washington, the first two states to legalize marijuana. So Colorado, the drop is right here. Now, when you look at the difference between the data sets, oh, this is the past year use and this is the past month use. It doesn't look much different anyway, by the way. 2 point drop here, 2 point drop there. They are the biggest drops. All the other drops are within like the same point margin. Washington experienced over a point drop. Total U.S. less than about 3/4 of a point, or no, that's about a half a point drop. So let me get this straight. Places where it's legalized seen the biggest drops in teen use. So that's like the exact opposite of the reefer madness that we keep hearing from Kevin Sabat and all these other people. So Colorado and Washington State legalized marijuana in 2012, with Alaska, Oregon, Washington, D.C., ending cannabis prohibition in 2014. For additional states voted to legalize marijuana in 2016, but those programs weren't running when the new survey was completed. With legalization opponents, while legalization opponents have long argued that ending prohibition would lead to skyrocketing use by young people, that doesn't seem to be happening. Sorry, I'm just way getting ahead of myself on all the reading tonight. Advocates, on the other hand, have maintained that regulating and controlling the cannabis market and instituting strict age restrictions would actually give teens less access to marijuana than they had when it was legal or when it was illegal, and there were no checks for age at the point of sale. Kind of like what I just said, but to add to that and build on it, these black market areas where marijuana used to be widely available, there's still marijuana available there, but now there's a lot less of a demand to go to those places for marijuana. And to be quite honest, man, those people that sell black market contraband aren't really interested in too many marijuana sales, to be honest. In a Facebook post, cannabis consulting firm Freeman and Koski Incorporated, which is run by Colorado's former top marijuana official, said the drop in teen use in the state coincides with an increase in funding prevention programs from cannabis taxes. So that's another thing going on is they basically have like a DARE type programs where they do drug education, and that is funded partially or fully. I'm not sure. It's basically help funding from the taxes generated from legal sales. So I don't know. I mean, it just seems too good to be true for someone like a prohibitionist to see something like that and they'd be like, "Oh, that's cool." So Colorado is effectively regulating marijuana for adult use. Teen use appears to be dropping now that the state and local authorities are overseeing the production and sale of marijuana, said Brian Vincente, partner at Vincente Cedarburg LLC, one of the lead drafters of Colorado's legalization measure. Quote, there are serious penalties for selling to minors, and regulated cannabis businesses are being vigilant in checking IDs. The days of arresting thousands of adults in order to prevent teens from using marijuana are over. Right. And if you keep going out with that propaganda that, oh, teen use will go up, we don't fucking care. That's not our responsibility. We live in the adult world. You don't ban pornography and all this other shit because you don't want teens to see it or kids to see this. We live in an adult world, and teens have parents. They should. And it's not my fucking job to be your teen's parent or whatever. The new state numbers are part of a state breakdown of NSDUH data that was released last week. Well, I'm glad someone's looking at some data, but I'm sure that the National Survey on Drug Use and Health is usually looking for numbers where they can kind of make bad propaganda out of. And this time they simply could not do it. They're forced to being honest when, shit is what it is. So North Dakota officials gather public input on medical marijuana. North Dakota health officials will begin gathering public input Monday about proposed medical marijuana rules as the state prepares to launch its program. Health officials plan to hear from prospective dispensary owners, patients, and caregivers, and anyone from the public who wants to comment at meetings in 6 cities over the coming week, according to the Williston Herald. Quote, as we continue to move forward in the process, transparency and diligence is important, and these hearings allow for transparency and input on the proposed rules, said Jason Wall, the interim director of the state's Division of Medical Marijuana. Officials from the North Dakota Department of Health will have their first meeting on Monday at Turtle Mountain Community College. In Belcourt. Then at the Williston Area Recreational Center later in the day. Meeting at the Minute and Bismarck are scheduled for Wednesday, and Fargo and Grand Forks on Thursday. Health officials will collect comments through December 26th before submitting recommendations to the Legislative Council by February 1st. After the department has an opportunity to fully consider the comments received, we'll provide information to the official to the Office of Attorney General for consideration and legal review. Voters approved medical marijuana in November of 2016, and state lawmakers crafted regulations earlier this year. Governor Doug Burgum approved those in April, but the drug isn't expected to be available to patients for another year. The guidelines for the program currently allow 2 growing sites and 8 dispensaries in the state. Well, crawling along. Last night, the Hartford City Council unanimously approved a resolution to support marijuana legalization in Connecticut. Good luck, Connecticut. It seems like you guys aren't really in the race to do the legislative thing, but excuse me with the yawning, as your neighbors are coming in, it looks like you might have no choice but to get on board. We're here in California, and we're looking at Humboldt calling for a 1-acre cap on cannabis cultivation to help small farmers, mind you. The North Coast, 2 state representatives are calling on the state to cap commercial cannabis farms to 1 acre per person, saying it will protect small farmers from being outcompeted by larger companies. However, some in the industry are saying the reinstating the cap so close to the planned New Year's Day rollout of the state's marijuana market would be inappropriate timing, with some farms having already been permitted at the local level to grow more than 1 acre. 2nd District Senator Mike McGuire from Healdsburg, and Assemblyman Jim Wood from Healdsburg, sent a letter to the Office of Administrative Law earlier this week that called for the cap to be included in the state's cannabis regulations, which are currently being finalized. Wood said not having the cap goes against previous efforts by the legislature to limit cultivation in the Medical Cannabis Regulation and Safety Act, which limited cultivation to 1 acre with an exception for a dispensary license that allowed up to 4 acres of cultivation. Quote, it undermines the work that we have done to protect small growers, at least at the outset, Wood said outside of the Humboldt County Board of Supervisors chambers in Eureka on Tuesday. Quote, we know that 5 years from now, all bets are off. But we got to give the people who are the real pioneers in the industry an opportunity to be successful and a way to bring them out of the shadows and into the regulated market. After the passage of recreational marijuana laws through Proposition 64 in November of 2016 and the legislature combining the medical and recreational rules through Senate Bill 94 earlier this year, the 1 acre cultivation limit was left out. California Department of Food and Agriculture then released the emergency cannabis cultivation rules last month, which also did not include the 1 acre cap. However, an environmental review of the rules released a few days earlier had included the cap. The Department of Food and Agriculture told the Times Standard at the time that it left out the cap from the final rules after careful consideration, including input from stakeholders. California Growers Association Executive Director Ezekiel Allen said he met with staff from Governor Jerry Brown's office on Tuesday, who said he told him that there never was going to be a cumulative cap on cultivation. Allen said he walked away from the meeting with an impression that the governor's office was disowning the Department of Food and Agriculture's November statement to the Times Standard. Quote, I'm a bit confused, frankly, and it seems just inconsistent, Allen said. California Department of Food and Agriculture spokesman Steve Lyle wrote in a statement to the Times Standard on Wednesday that a 1 acre limit, quote, has not been in the proposed regulations at any point and was not included in the emergency regulations due to the fact that Proposition 64, the law guiding the process did not provide any authority to include it. Quote, however, local jurisdictions may impose that limitation on their own if it meets the needs of their constituents, he continued. The governor's office deferred all inquiries on the matter to the Department of Food and Agriculture. The California Cannabis Industry Association, which represents about 400 cannabis-related businesses throughout the state, has stated creating a cap so close to the January 1st statewide marijuana market opener is the wrong approach. The association's communications and outreach director, Josh Drayton, said because the cap was not in the combined medical and recreational cannabis laws, the 1 acre cap has been made into an issue without any foundation. That being said, Drayton said the association does not have an official position on the cultivation cap. Making a cap currently is a major policy change, he said. It's not just a tweak that can be made and implemented immediately. That is something that a major policy change that changes a statute that needs to be dealt with in the regular rulemaking process. According to the Humboldt County Planning and Building Department, only a handful of people in the county have applied for cultivation permits to grow more than 1 acre. So, wow, you know, this is going to be a weird rollout. I hope everything goes smoothly for all the farmers. They've already had enough shit to deal with all the fires and shit. So back to the foot race on the west or on the East Coast, Vermont, and once again, Tom Angel, like I said, and I will in fact include a link to his Patreon in the description. So in the race between, I believe you're going to see Vermont and New Jersey. They're going to be the ones coming out of the gate charging. And Vermont is indicating that every time you turn on Tom Angel, Vermont has a new thing to say. Vermont appears poised to become the next state to legalize marijuana, and according to top elected officials, it is likely to do so within a matter of weeks. Last week, House Speaker Mitzi Johnson, a Democrat, said she expects, quote, it'll likely pass in early January. Days earlier, Governor Phil Scott, a Republican, said he is comfortable signing cannabis legalization bill into law in early 2018. And on Tuesday, Senate President pro tempore Tim Ashe, a member of the Progressive Party, said he and his fellow colleagues, quote, look forward to working with the governor to make sure that the bill gets to the finish line. I hate that statement because when you say that the bill gets, we're going to work with the governor to make sure the bill gets to the finish. They've already made some tweaks and some adjustments so that, you know, the governor was happy with it. But that just kind of opens the door for more compromising and more tweaking and stuff. Who knows? Whatever. So if the tripartisan group of officials follow through and enacts legalization in early 2018, it would make Vermont the first state to end cannabis prohibition by an act of lawmakers. All 8 states that have legalized marijuana so far have done so via ballot measures approved by voters. Meanwhile, Jersey is also considered a top contender to become the first state to pass cannabis legalization bill. Incoming Governor Phil Murphy, a Democrat, campaigned on the issue, and the state's president says he's committed to passing a bill next year. But the Green Mountain State has a considerable head start on the Garden State. In Vermont, which operates on a legislative biennium, the Senate has already passed the legalization bill. All that is required to get it to Scott's desk for signing into law is one more House floor vote, and that could happen any day after the legislature reconvenes on January 3rd. I guess I decided that I didn't really feel like anything on this page was really worth checking into. But again, you want to support Tom Angel, I will put a link to his Patreon in the description. So Ohio. Shit. One more try. So back to Ohio. Oh, come on. I know where I got that for sure. Anyone over 21 could grow weed at home under a proposed Ohio ballot initiative. I'm not sure that's the biggest deal that I would have focused on in here. So, anyone over 21 could grow weed at home. Yeah, that's cool. So, right away, I'm not sure what the numbers are, but right away, when you say you want to legalize marijuana, but then you tell people they can't grow weed at home or it's illegal, that's absurd. That's not legalizing marijuana. That's just giving somebody else the right to fucking make money off of something, and you can still get in trouble for a lot of things. In jail is the thing that they put you in when you get in trouble. So a group of local not investigators, but investors who failed in their bid to secure a state license to grow medical marijuana on Monday announced plans for a statewide ballot issue that would fully legalize marijuana. Jimmy Gould, chairman of Cincinnati-based Greenlight Acquisitions, has proposed an Ohio constitutional amendment that would allow anyone 21 or older to grow marijuana in their homes for personal use or commercial cultivation. Gould said the ballot issue would not conflict with Ohio's current medical marijuana law, but would expand legalized marijuana use among qualified adults with a physician's recommendation. Gould said he would need 305,592 signatures to place the issue before Ohio voters next year. His group plans to finalize the language in the proposal and begin circulating it next month. The initial filing deadline for the ballot proposal is July 4th, 2018. I guess we'll find out how much adult citizens want to be able to administer cannabis for themselves, Gould said. I think people want to have more control over their lives. He's a longtime proponent of decriminalizing marijuana, which he said he can be a useful tool in dealing with a variety of chronic conditions, including opioid addiction, which continues to plague Ohio. He co-founded the group Responsible Ohio, which was behind Ohio's failed Issue 3 marijuana initiative in 2015 that would have legalized marijuana for both recreational and medical use. The measure lost in all 88 Ohio counties, with nearly two-thirds of the voters statewide voting no. But the new proposal, quote, is as different from Issue 3 as night and day, Gould said. We spent a lot of time and effort to get this right. This is not Issue 3 revisited. Gould said the new proposal tosses out many of the contentious items that he blames for 3's ultimate defeat, including designating certain properties as the only places in Ohio where the cannabis plant could be legally grown. The stipulation would have benefited only a handful, as in 10, of mega growers. The concept of the rich getting richer goes right out the window with this, Gould said. He said the new ballot proposal is a responsible way to fully legalize marijuana use, cultivation, possession, processing, and dispensing, and regulate it like alcohol-related businesses in Ohio. At least one critic charges the ballot proposal is simply an effort to use Ohio's democratic process for personal gain. Quote, the initiative constitutional amendment proposed today is yet another ill-conceived ballot initiative with dishonest intentions, said State Rep. Naraj Antony, Republican from Miamisburg. And he introduced a joint resolution to change the procedures for initiating statutes and constitutional amendments. You know what, dude? How about this is fucking democracy, so get over it. But anyway, so that's your Ohio update from 2015. The guy that was part of the thing where they tried to take over the whole thing. From what I understand, and I seen a tweet from Tom Angel talking about this, this guy's just, this Gould dude, he's just really bitter. This guy here, he's really, really fucking bitter that he didn't get a medical marijuana license to grow. in the Ohio medical marijuana program, where there's only like a couple dozen licenses that they're going to give out at the onset of it. And apparently, he had a press conference where he was talking about this new proposal here. And at that press conference, he basically just sat there and talked shit about um, the uh, the fact that he didn't get that license. um, so he's got money. They spent more than $20 million on the Responsible Ohio deal. Wow. That's a lot of money to fail. So this thing would provide for the legal cultivation, possessing, dispensing, and consumption of marijuana by 21 or older. Um, the finer points are basically just his talking points, and he's looking for suggestions and recommendations and stuff in the early phases. So we'll see what happens with that. I know we're gonna hear more from it. Massachusetts cannabis panel backs social use venues. Massachusetts marijuana regulators have given preliminary approval to a plan that would allow pot bars. Oh, Associated Press. Okay, whenever I pull up a cannabis these days, it seems like almost every time they're just shooting articles like I do on Twitter. I don't really rebrand my articles. It's just clearly Twitter. It's me retweeting it. So the cannabis, which I don't really even understand what they are. They're their own beast now, and they do their own thing. And half of what they're doing, it seems like, is just shooting articles over from somebody else. And this one's from the Associated Press. I've seen them do like San Francisco uh, Chronicles. Those guys are really anti-marijuana. I mean, you don't know. A lot of people just start reading and they don't know what they're talking about, but they'll be like, they'll associate these negative articles that they have from time to time with the cannabis. But just anybody in general using the word pot just makes me cringe. And it sucks that I don't know if they're allowed to or not, but to go in there, you can make this story your own. Just read this, take the shit you need out of it, change the words, don't plagiarize it, you know. I don't understand how you got to use the word pot, though. It just sucks. Massachusetts marijuana regulators have given preliminary approval to a plan that would allow cannabis bars, as well as the sale and consumption of cannabis at businesses including restaurants, yoga studios, movie theaters, and massage parlors. The State Cannabis Control Commission, in meetings this week, approved the creation of a mixed use license. Businesses approved for such mixed use licenses could only offer single serve portions of marijuana, which customers would not be allowed to take off the premise. Cannabis Commissioner Shailene Title. And by the way, what? Say what? What the fuck? So you're at this cannabis bar, and the only thing you can do is get one single serving of marijuana, which what a one joint, one puff of a joint, one dab, one something, and you can't take it off the premises. You got to do it there. What are you worried about? I mean, I know that bars can refuse to serve somebody when they get too fucked up, but there isn't no thing that just flat out says, "Hey, you can only serve this many drinks to somebody." You know, like you're only allowed to serve 2 beers to somebody or one shot of liquor, or whatever. They don't have that shit. There's nothing like that for alcohol, and that's the one where the more you compound it, the more closer to someone just being a total fucking felonious dick becomes, or someone fucking gets in a car wreck and kills people, or someone just generally just is too fucking wasted and is annoying as shit. Cannabis Commissioner Shailene Title tells the Boston Globe that the creation of pot bars and licenses for other businesses should help reduce marijuana consumption in public spaces, which is illegal. The agency plans to file detailed draft regulations by December 29th and enact final rules by March 15th. Cannabis sales are scheduled to begin July 1st. And I read another thing talking about this one lady that's like from the Hamptons or something, and she wants to open up one of these pot bars, you know. Good luck, guys. Good luck. Another one from Marijuana Business Daily. Not a big, not even sure how much of these people I actually read. I like having the writer's name, though. More than a year after Denver voters approved marijuana social use lounges, the city has its first applicant, a coffee shop that plans to allow vaping and the consumption of cannabis edibles. That sounds more realistic. Like, where did you come up with that one thing in Massachusetts where it's like, we should make it so they only get to use one marijuana thing while they're there? That's it. We got to make sure there's a limit. But why? Is there some kind of a reason for that? Can you tell me why? The coffee joint's application comes more than 5 months after Denver finalized rules for social use clubs. The rules are so restrictive that some wondered whether any businesses would apply. Entrepreneurs Risk Salyuk and Kirill Merkeloff told the Denver Post that they'll start selling coffee by the end of the year and allow social cannabis use if their application is approved. A public hearing on license would be held in the next 2 or 3 months, city officials told the Post. They cloned a dispensary, 136 Yuma, next to the coffee joint. Business with marijuana sales licenses can't apply for on-site consumption in Denver, but they're allowed to open separate operations. Denver has come under fire for setting up elaborate rules for consumption clubs after they were approved by the city's voters in 2016. Other municipalities with recreational marijuana sales, notably Las Vegas, have said they're watching Denver's experience with marijuana clubs before licensing them. Oh, because you're so worried that people are going to what? Enjoy themselves without fucking feloniously being a dick to the other people in the establishment, like alcoholics or people that drink alcohol that aren't even alcoholics. And like I said earlier, if you try that shit, Sessions, guess what? There's some fucking resistance. And it's definitely the kind of resistance that works. And I'll show you why. So, feds won't get marijuana crackdown help from Colorado governor candidate says. If the feds want to crack down on business or consumers who are complying with Colorado's marijuana laws, they're going to have to do it without any help from the state. That's the stance of a Democratic congressman who was running for governor in 2018. Quote, I will push back on any federal effort to interfere with our laws and not share information if it's not related to a criminal investigation under our own law or ordered by a court, Congressman Jared Polis said on Monday. He's also one of those members of the Cannabis Caucus, and he definitely did sign that letter earlier. So, quote, the federal government has very limited law enforcement resources in the states. Most of the law enforcement is in the hands of cities, counties, and states, and the states. So as long as we don't cooperate, it would be hard, almost impossible, for there to be a major federal-only enforcement action. Polis, who has been one of the leading voices in Congress for cannabis law reform in recent years, is giving up his seat for a shot at being elected his state's next governor next year. But in the meantime, he is still fighting on Capitol Hill to try to scale back federal interference with the cannabis laws of his state and others. Noting that a current budget rider prevents the U.S. Department of Justice from spending money to undermine the state medical cannabis policies, Polis said he is working with colleagues to get an extended into next year. Quote, I plan to offer it as an amendment if it's not included in the base fiscal year 2018 spending bill. We'll do everything I can to get it included, he said in a Reddit AMA session on, quote, the restriction on funding being used to contravene state medical marijuana laws has passed Congress before and would probably pass even more now if we get it to a vote. Problem is that the House of Representative leaders in recent years blocked the measure and other marijuana amendments from even being considered for floor votes. Also, in a Reddit thread, Polis talked about the impact of Colorado's marijuana legalization law that voters approved in 2012. Quote, overall positive, he said, quote, I supported Amendment 64 and think that it not only generates tax revenue, creates jobs, but also helps drive a criminal cartel out of business. The criminal cartels out of business. When asked if he saw any negatives to the state ending cannabis prohibition, Polis said, I don't see a lot of downsides to it being legal. I think it's important that we do more work to reduce driving under the influence of any drug or alcohol and that we try to prevent kids from using marijuana. New federal data released last week found that youth cannabis use is declining in Colorado since legalization. And there it is again, the Tom Angel Patreon button. I think I'm at the point where I plugged that thing more than I've ever heard anybody plug their own. So marijuana sales reports, these are the actual reports that came out by the Department of Revenue in Colorado. So effective December 12, 2017, the Colorado Department of Revenue released statewide historical, medical, and retail marijuana sales data from January 2014 to the present, and will release monthly reports going forward on the 7th business day of every month. The marijuana sales report on this page are not the same as the marijuana tax data reports. The marijuana sales reports show unaudited monthly sales as if reported as self-reported by businesses on state sales returns and do not use Metro data, the Marijuana Enforcement Division marijuana inventory tracking system. The marijuana tax data report showed tax revenue collected monthly as posted in the state's accounting system. The marijuana sales report reflects sales made during the filing period, typically a month. Here's an example sales reporting timeline. Sales made in January are filed with the CDOR in February and reported on this page in March. Reports on this page are labeled with the filing month, January, in the example. The table below shows sales from the medical and retail marijuana stores by calendar year starting in January 2014. Although sales of medical marijuana began prior to 2014, CDOR cannot systematically track sales until January of 2014. And, you know, you can download PDFs on this. I don't know if anybody's really too interested in the actual numbers, but if you look at this summary chart here, this will show you monthly sales numbers. And from 2014 to 2017, from when recreational sales basically started to when this report was filed or whatever. This is medical marijuana. These are recreational numbers here. And this is overall. And what you'll notice is a lot of people always say, oh, when you put the recreational into the market, it's going to kill the medical marijuana. Well, that didn't happen. It's right there. Not much else to say about this other than I guess that's like one of the biggest points to make. Revenues over $1 billion, you know, starting in 2015, and it just keeps going. Total marijuana sales, $4,246,180,455 from 2014 till present. And you know, that's money that the Mexican drug cartel used to have a nice piece of that number right there. Or if you just want to look at 1 year, here's the best year, the most complete data. 2016, best year right here, $1.3 billion. It might be the new norm. We don't know for Colorado. So meanwhile in Hawaii, we talk about hemp in Hawaii. Hemp may expand its limited hemp program dramatically in 2018 when the state lawmakers join policymakers in other states and consider allowing farmers to sell the plant. Hawaii already allows hemp production thanks to a 2016 law allowing limited research plots and seed development. But the state's hemp farmers aren't permitted to sell what they grow, and a proposal before lawmakers would change that. If passed, the bill would allow commercial sale of flower stock and seeds and thus would make Hawaii's hemp program permanent instead of temporary. The state's hemp expansion was proposed in early 2017 but didn't pass, and the bill is still alive for lawmakers in 2018, according to the 10th Amendment Center, a California-based advocacy group that promotes states' rights. Hawaii, which began medical marijuana sales last summer, joined several other states that allow hemp but are expected to debate expanding their programs next year. Legislators in Colorado, Indiana, and Virginia are all poised to debate expanded hemp programs to allow for more commercial production or end uses for hemp. And that's just another awesome story on the hemp front. Some of the lawmakers I seen when I did a story about this before were talking about, hey, we want to make hemp in Hawaii, so it's basically like tomatoes. Anybody can grow any amount. You can make commercial licenses for it. We're not going to track seeds and none of that shit. And also in Hawaii, we remember the story where Honolulu sent out the 30 notices to gun owners telling them to turn in their guns. Honolulu's police chief ended a requirement that medical marijuana patients relinquish their guns. Chief Susan Ballard said Wednesday, medical marijuana patients can retain guns they already own, but they can't buy additional guns once they become a patient, the Honolulu Star Advisor reported. And that's sort of what I've been saying all along, but I haven't been swearing by it, and I have seen people getting arrested after they get their door kicked in for a marijuana raid, and all of a sudden the guns just add to their misery. So merely having a medical marijuana card doesn't mean you're using marijuana, Ballard said. Huh? We can't prove you're using marijuana. Our practice of having them turn in their firearms was incorrect. When you got a Second Amendment to the Constitution of your country, I would say that it's always incorrect to anytime you try to go confiscating people's guns. You guys don't really even have the fucking wherewithal to prevent people that shouldn't have guns from purchasing them in the first place. Time and time again, we see people getting away with buying guns when they shouldn't have been able to buy them at a gun store, not in the street off of some shady character in the back alley. The department will return firearms to the two people who voluntarily relinquished them, Ballard said. Retired State Supreme Court Justice Steve Levinson, a member of the Honolulu Police Commission, questioned why the department was denying firearm permits for marijuana patients, but not people using much stronger prescription drugs. Quote, I'm a little puzzled as to why the distinction between medical marijuana and medical opioids. And while Carl Bergquist, executive director of the Drug Policy Forum of Hawaii, said the police department should revisit the policy since medical cannabis is legal under state law. Quote, on behalf of physicians, nurses, caregivers, and patients involved in the cannabis program, the assumption that they're all impaired or a danger to society is a great insult, Bergquist said. A policy like this could push people out of the regulated system. We think these patients should not be stigmatized in this fashion. So I agree with that. If you excuse me, I must grab a drink. All right. Whoa. we're back. Still silence from the NRA, still crickets. I was wondering about that. I'm like, well, I read this story and I didn't see that the NRA had anything at all to do with the outrage that might have ensued. So back to the opioid thing that we were talking about earlier, and the fact that the deaths from the opioids are going down where the medical marijuana is. This was written by Rick Thompson, who actually don't live too far away from here. Americans for Safe Access, a national medical marijuana patient advocacy group, on Thursday released a paper on the opioid crisis and how cannabis medicines can help break the addiction cycle in prescription pain medication abuse. The paper uses Michigan as a case study of the effectiveness of the state's medical marijuana program in diminishing the deaths and hospitalizations reported. According to the document, based on national statistics, Michigan's medical marijuana program resulted in 531 lives saved and 23% fewer hospitalizations in Michigan from opioid exposure. The paper is titled Medical Cannabis as a Tool to Combat Pain and the Opioid Crisis, a Blueprint for State Policy, and was announced via press release. The blueprint reports that the state with medical marijuana programs see a 25% reduction in opioid deaths, and in Michigan, that math yields a life-saving total of 531 people. Quote, research shows that opioid deaths have decreased in states with medical cannabis laws by as much as 25% and has found a 23% reduction in hospitalizations related to opioid independence or abuse. The blueprint states, citing published research from the Journal of American Medical Association and Drug and Alcohol Dependence magazine. Michigan lost 2,126 individuals to opioid overdoses in the last year. If we consider the research which supports an up to 25% decrease in medical cannabis states, an additional 531 individuals could have been victims if it were not for the state's medical cannabis program. The blueprint's intent to inspire change in state medical marijuana programs which increase enrollment. Michigan already has the nation's second largest population of registered cannabis patients, with more than 250,000 Michiganders enrolled in the state database. There are over 5 million Michigan residents who are prevented from registering to use medical cannabis, and that's a problem per the blueprint. That includes more than 1.5 million people living in poverty who cannot afford the registration or the medicine, over 2.6 million people whose employees test for drugs and have no exemption for medical cannabis patients, 33,000 living in hospice, and 45,000 living in assisted living situations which do not allow for cannabis consumption. 52,100 federal employees and 672,215 veterans who are prevented from accessing cannabis due to a VA or federal anti-cannabis policies. Over 91,000 who are homebound and cannot receive certifications or obtain medicine, and 3,342 ill individuals who are on organ transplant lists and risk losing their life-saving operations if found to have cannabinoid byproducts in their system. I never thought about that. I never thought about it that way. Like, I know a lot of people don't give a shit about having a med card and don't look at marijuana as something that's all that medicinal. And in Michigan, a lot of people don't take medical marijuana all that seriously. They think it's just some kind of a thing where you can get this green card and you don't have to worry about going to jail when they catch you with a couple of grams of weed or some shit. But that's a good thing to look at, is all the people that should have medical marijuana should be using medical marijuana but aren't. ASA suggested response to the enrollment crisis contains action items for advocates and legislators, including pass laws allowing medical professionals to choose conditions or expressly allow pain and opioid use disorder to lists of qualifying conditions. Pain's already on there, chronic pain. Opioid use disorder should be. Pass laws to allow hospice and assisted living facilities to become caregivers and allow medical cannabis use on these premises. Have the Department of Health and Board of Medicine notify medical professionals about continuing medical education courses for cannabis science. The Department of Health includes information about medical cannabis in all opioid crisis materials. That, they should just have counselors too as well talking to people. Instead, they got this 12-step program bullshit where they're like, oh no, marijuana is just going to trigger you back into your opioids, which is total bullshit. Pass laws that have a high number of access points / dispensaries and creative incentives for communities that are licensing them. Create low-income and hardship waivers for ID costs. Pass laws and regulations to prevent shortages of medical cannabis. Pass laws banning drug testing for THC for employment. Create a medical cannabis research and development fund. Now, I definitely like this pass laws banning drug testing for THC employment. And I've heard this from other people that's a plank of their new campaign that they're looking at doing. I'll tell you this. They need to do this nationwide because cannabinoids being tested for in drug tests, it's just counterproductive, man. It's the easiest one to fail. It stays in your system the longest, and it isn't even really relevant. I mean, who cares if someone smokes a joint? Should that determine everything else about their life? Fuck no, it's just something that they do in their spare time. All right, most of the improvements suggested by the ASA blueprint will be accompanied by the introduction and passage of legislation modifying the MMMA and other laws, which the ASA has already drafted and included in the blueprint. I'd like to see those. The international press release contained a quote from one of Michigan's most beloved cannabis advocates, Jamie Lowell, who said, "Medical cannabis allowed me to wean myself off opiates. I am hopeful that by introducing this model legislation, we can reduce some of the barriers to medical cannabis and help even more Michigan patients." Now my cat's trying to be in the video. It has been nearly 2 months since President Trump declared the opioid crisis a public health emergency. However, since the declaration there has been no effort on the federal level to provide funds for this crisis, said Steve Scheer, Executive Director of Americans for Safe Access. It is clear that states will have to take healthcare outcomes into their own hands. Quote, "I'm excited to introduce this book to potential bill sponsors in my state," said Lowell, who sits on the board of directors of my Legalize 2018 organization. The group and the Committee to Regulate Marijuana Like Alcohol submitted last month over 360,000 signatures on petitions to put in adult use of cannabis proposal before Michigan voters in the 2018 general election. So, to summarize this, it looks like this Americans for Safe Access wants to improve the medical marijuana program in Michigan. I can't argue that it needs it. But it looks like the state already beat you to it. We're going to see how you can improve it. I don't know. Johnny, you can't climb out the window. Hold on, guys. Be right back one more time. Bad over here. You can be in my video if you're back there. All right. Speaking of Michigan, the Licensing and Regulatory Affairs released the official medical marijuana application for the facilities. Laura has released the official application for prospective licensees to apply for a medical marijuana facilities license. Starting December 15th, that's today, Laura will begin accepting the applications. It'll be a two-step process where the applicant will undergo steps in pre-qualification and then license qualification. If the applicant already has a location secured, then they will be able to submit both step materials at the same time. Here is the license application. You can find it at Laura. You can fill it out digitally on their website, or you can fill out this printable version, and it's a doozy. Look at this thing. Like everything else with these regulations, and I gotta say, I don't know what regulation packages look like or applications for licenses look like for every industry, but how many industries do you know of that have 47-page applications for a license? And these things, they want you to disclose everything. I mean, the list of disclosures, it's like 25 pages or more of just disclosures. Consent forms, and just, I don't know. Litigation history. I could see where you might need to do certain, like, for example, I don't want to sound like I'm being really like too whiny and bitchy about how closely they're regulating this, and like they're acting like you have to fill out this application, and it's basically just like you got to be the most upstanding citizen in the universe to fucking get to fill this out, right? You can't have any connection to anybody doing this or that. I don't know, like the disclosures have something to do with who they don't want to have in the industry corruption wise, or because you have some kind of criminal record. Here you're like talking about if somebody is a family member in public office in general. So it's interesting to look at. I have no intention of filling this out for any reason. And you have these different license types. You got your growers, you got your processors, you got your secured transporters. All these license fees are $6,000 each. And don't forget, you got to have that money for that you got to have that extra money. You got to have those extra assets, and you got to be able to show that you have a lot of money to get the approval of the board, for them to know that you're going to be able to pull this off without losing everything. Not that why should it matter to them? Yeah. And finally in Michigan, we have a little more reefer madness. I promised from my video about the reefer madness that's coming to Michigan. Well, this is an attorney general candidate in Michigan. And he's got a few things to say about medical marijuana. Check this guy out.
Medical marijuana. Is that a mess?
The system has been a mess, of the medical marijuana system in Michigan.
Did you help to make it a mess by voting yes?
Did I help by voting yes on the medical marijuana? I think what was on that ballot was not real clear to a lot of people. in terms of that it would be maybe prescribed by a physician through a pharmacy and the like, and that's not. But again, as you mentioned earlier, you know, the federal law is not compatible right now with the state law, and that's what makes it very difficult and makes it a mess too.
That was a lot of bullshit that he just said. When people voted for that law, he's acting like everybody that went to go vote were just like completely ignorant of it, and they're just like, "Oh, I'm gonna vote for medical marijuana." And then later on, after the vote happened, you had all these people that, you know, don't like marijuana, and they were like, "Oh yeah, I voted yes for the medical marijuana, but then I see that you guys are abusing it, and you guys are just out there you just get a green card so you can go smoke your weed." You know, and they were the naysayers that said all that shit. I don't think they ever voted for it in the first place. And most people were pretty educated about what the medical marijuana law was going to do. As far as like, they didn't know if there was going to be dispensaries or not because it didn't say it and nobody was talking about it. There you have it. But what was in it was the caregivers and the patients and shit. And when people kind of had a loose interpretation of that, or that if you're a medical marijuana patient, or if you want to grow 12 plants, you can grow 12 plants.
Because
did you vote yes on it?
I'm not going to talk about my personal voting record on that issue, but what I will say is that what makes it very challenging is we have two different systems right now. We have a federal system and a state system, and we're seeing this incompatibility that marijuana today is much different than the marijuana from the 60s.
Whoa, slow down. So the first thing he said was that there's a federal system and a state system. So he's basically, that's a prohibitionary stance. That's one of those Governor LePage type, you know, oh, you know, Jeff Sessions called me the other day and he said, you know, you probably shouldn't legalize marijuana over there in Maine because, you know, the feds might come and crack down on you. And LePage is like, yeah, okay, we'll do that. We'll try our hardest not to legalize marijuana, even though it's already legal. We'll just not sign the regs into law. This guy here, he's running for the Attorney General of Michigan, and he's a Democrat. He's an attorney, or he's a district attorney, a U.S. district attorney appointee from Obama. He's an Obama era federal prosecutor that has prosecuted patients and caregivers in Michigan for marijuana crimes, or whatever you want to call it. Now, the other piece of his reefer madness that he offered, in conjunction with the fact that it's federally illegal and you got a state and a federal system, so he's not like one of those attorney generals like you heard out west, where they all got together and they were like, "Hey, fuck you, Sessions. We're writing you letters and telling you that we're going to protect our citizens from your, you know, federal crackdown bullshit." He's not one of those. He's not sounding like one of those at all. He's sounding like one of those chicken shits like, "Oh, we better not legalize marijuana because then the feds will come and kick our doors in and shit. We wouldn't want that now, would we?" And by the way, marijuana it's a lot stronger than it used to be. Don't forget that. He threw that in there like, what the fuck? Who cares? Why does people think that's some kind of a point that needs to be made? I don't fucking get it, man. What's the point there? You know what you should say is, hey, it works these days. It used to be shit, but people have bred that shit into some good stuff, and, you know, you can use a lot less of it to get some good effects, the desired effects. You don't have to tax your lungs out to fucking get stoned, quite frankly.
THC level, the active psychoactive ingredient that gets people high in the 60s that people were smoking back then, was 1.6% THC.
Are you fucking kidding me, bro? The only thing that's 1.6% THC, if it's even that, is the NIDA research weed that you guys keep trying to push out to us. When somebody wants to research medical marijuana, you give them that shit. Come on, man. Weed in the 60s by and large, wasn't garbage that you guys keep talking about. But I think what he is getting at is the percentage has gone up in actual cannabis, you know, in the horticulture of cannabis, in the, you know, in the biology of cannabis. What you're looking at is an evolution that happened because breeders, quite frankly, tried to breed the THC levels up, which is to say that there's always been stuff with higher THC levels around there. And 5% is probably a good average for something maybe back in the 60s. Or you might even want to go lower, like a 3 to 5%, because there probably was some shit that was testing under 3%. But that doesn't mean, you know, that because the marijuana of today is 15 to 20%, or even 25% or 30%, that that's a big fucking deal. It's not. Because it requires less of your attention to get the same amount of high that you want to get. It isn't like you smoke the joint and you know, it's not like heroin where when it's more potent, which today's heroin and fentanyl and shit like that is way more potent than the shit that they had in the 60s. So if you did the same amount of what you thought you were doing in the 60s, you would die from it, right? Well, that's not the fucking case with marijuana, fucking dumbass. I can't believe this guy's a Democrat, but then again, I do. I mean, Democrats run the same bullshit propaganda that Republicans do, time and time again. This guy wants to basically, like, pretend like a prohibitionist when it comes to these talking points.
THC. The marijuana people are smoking today is well over 12%. So the marijuana today is 10 times more potent than it was back in the 60s. And for the
what the fuck is the point of that? Who cares?
edibles, the medibles, where you distill it down into a rosin and make it into food, that can be 80 to 90% THC. So if you have a gum,
a rosin. So if you make medibles, you're talking about 80 to 90% THC. That's not even fucking close to true ever. The reason that it gets you higher is it turns THC turns into a more powerful compound when you eat it. When you metabolize it that way. Look into that. I'll get back to you on that later. But it's definitely not the case that, you know, something that has about the same amount of THC as a joint in it, like 0.5 grams of, I don't know.
Gummy bear, which very few people can eat just one. I know Tim can, but all of us don't have that discipline. The amount of gummy bear that's medical marijuana to get a man, an adult male high, is just the ear.
So he just said that the ear of a gummy bear will get an adult male high. What does that even mean, and why does that even matter? And why is that your answer to the guy's question? You're way off topic with this bullshit. But this is some serious bullshit that nobody believes, and it just made you look like the dumbest person in the room. You're running for what again? Attorney General?
Just the ear. You'd have to tear off the ear, and that would get you high. So if once you've popped a few of those in your mouth...
So once you popped a few ears in your mouth, or a few gummy bears, because if an ear's all you need, why would you take a few of them? Why don't you just take like a head, or like take a half of a gummy bear?
By the time it gets through your system, through your stomach, again, because you're ingesting through your stomach, you don't even realize how high you are, and that's how people get overdose.
Should the state...
So he's saying that because gummy bears are so powerful that you start eating them and you're gobbling them up. You eat a couple of them, and next thing you know it, you don't know how high you're going to be because it takes a while for it to you know, metabolize through your stomach. And then you overdose. And then you wake up the next day and you're like, damn, thank God that I fell asleep.
Hang back on legalizing marijuana.
What does overdosing on marijuana mean, dude? I don't get what you just said there. What's the fucking point?
and wait for the federal government to deal with it?
Well, the people are certainly getting out ahead of the federal government by virtue of what they may or may not vote for on these referendum votes statewide. And so, let's be frank, the federal government has been very slow on this. I mean, there's been a lot of analysis by the DEA and by the FDA to see whether or not marijuana has a medicinal benefit. And so,
no, there fucking hasn't. They've been stonewalling us left and right. The FDA knows there's medicinal value because they just gave fucking Incest Therapeutics Schedule 2 on a synthetic THC. So they're just lying to us when they say that there's no medicinal value. It's a fucking lie. THC, CBD, if you say that THC and CBD doesn't have medicinal value, nobody's fucking believing anything you say after that, you fucking idiot.
So to wait for that, you know, may be more prudent because then we would know what the law should be. But you see the people.
He's again on that federal point. Oh, that we don't know what they're gonna do, so we should be prudent and wait. Dude, if the people vote a fucking referendum in, it doesn't really fucking matter.
We live in a republic democracy, and the people of the states are.
We live in a republic democracy. Are you really serious when you say that, dude? I don't think we're either anymore. We live in a fucking oligarchy. This is a straight up like the government belongs to the highest bidder style fucking like game of crap shooting. So don't even tell me about how this is a fucking republic or a fucking democracy at this point.
Saying we want to move ahead with this in a lot of states.
Counselor, with all due respect, there's going to be some of your critics who are going to watch your performance here on two issues. You refuse to take a point saying it's your personal vote, which it clearly is. They're going to say, you know what, this guy was afraid to take a stance because it would offend his liberal base and he would also lose conservative votes, and therefore, for political reason, he's punting.
Well,
yeah, what'd you vote on that? When it came time, what'd you vote?
Never been one to avoid a difficult political position. When I ran for Congress in 2010, again,
well,
I ran as a Democrat.
Well,
I'm thinking what I'm saying. Well,
why don't you fucking answer the question then, dipshit?
Well, critics can say what they want to say, but what I'm saying is I'm taking a prudent and appropriate step-by-step approach. I want to see what the referendum says. I want to see.
Then read the damn thing. It's only been available since like March. So you read the referendum, then you can have an opinion, then you can talk about your nuanced little talking points about why you don't like it or whatever, or why the feds will crack our skulls in if we try to do it. So you know, if you don't read it, then you don't. Again, you're not being honest with us. You're not being intellectually honest as a part of the conversation. Like, I'm not gonna go argue a fucking position over here with like. Here's what you're doing basically. You're over here and you hear a couple people having a conversation about something that you know fuck all nothing about. You don't have any idea about what they're talking about. So let's say they're talking about bird conservation or some shit. Or they're bird watching and they got their binoculars and then you just walk up to them and just start talking about some random bird related thing, wildlife law or some shit that might affect what they're doing or it might not. And that's what you're doing. You have no idea what you're talking about when you don't read the thing and you're just sitting here fucking with us. I don't do it.
See how it's implemented. And I am saying again that as Attorney General, I would not undercut what the people decide.
Then why won't you take a position on the fucking thing, man? And we are talking about regulating marijuana like alcohol. And he's not taking a position on it. He's acting like, well, you know, I'm not going to stick up for you when the feds come, but I'm going to respect the will of the voters. It's two different things.
Based on my personal beliefs.
Well, marijuana, you're going to be the Attorney General, douchebag. So that is definitely your job to protect the people in your state for following the law against some tyrannical federal government fucking crackdown.
No, what's in the proposal.
We do know what's in the proposal, but
I don't think you do.
We don't know what's in the final language.
It is the final language. That is definitely the final language. Are you a fucking what? You just lost your job as an attorney if you don't realize that the referendum that we already have the signatures for, they've already been submitted. I don't know what this guy's talking about, man. Like, he's sitting here acting like there's some way that the language is going to change on the actual ballot proposal. From the ballot proposal till it being the final language, what's that even mean? It's all right there in black and white. You can read it.
Of the ballot language as proposed.
No,
and a couple things that are going to be important.
We know what the
A couple
initiative
things that are going to be very important in that are we going to have adequate disclosure in terms of the content of THC, just like we do with...
That's in the MMFLA already. I don't think they're gonna like not do that. Who cares anyway? What's the big deal? Yeah, sure, we want to put whatever you tell us to put on the label, we'll put it on the fucking label. That's a moot point. It's in the fucking regulation package already. I mean, it isn't detailed like here's exactly how your label should look and shit like that. It just says you got to label your shit. And one of the things that you would assume would be THC levels. Duh, what else are you gonna fucking put on there? Happy sunshine, graphics and shit. I don't even think that's allowed.
Alcohol, in terms of what percentages is alcohol in.
And once again, he's trying to do this comparison, this false comparison, this false equivalent shit of the level of THC and the level of alcohol. Well, you gotta have the alcohol level on a package. All right, that's cool, dude, but THC levels is not that big of a fucking deal. Edibles is that he's continuously bouncing back and forth on this edibles thing. I think he's afraid of edibles. He's totally afraid of edibles, and he thinks that people are gonna fucking die if they eat them or something. So I think that's what his big worry is. Don't worry, bro. We'll fucking label them properly. We'll tell you how much THC is on the fucking package. That way you won't like freak out and eat too much or whatever.
In alcoholic beverages, and are we going to protect children and minors from access?
The fucking law says you got to be 21 to go to the store and buy it. So what up?
Accessing it, and that
I thought you said you fucking knew what was in the referendum, dude. It says 21. That's what the proposal is, and that's the final language because it's fucking got to be the final language. That's the fucking law.
Those are some details that I think we still need to examine.
I think we need to examine this guy's actual ability to know what the fucking law is or whatever, man. It's sad this guy's prosecuted people for marijuana crimes, period. And now he's sitting here acting like he's gonna like know anything better for anybody. And he's the Democrat, guys.
What do you think the relationship is between the Attorney General and the Governor? What do you think it should be? Is the Attorney General the Governor's lawyer? How do you view that from a philosophical standpoint?
The Attorney General is the people's lawyer. The one thing about the Attorney General, you don't answer to a president.
Counseled governors going all the way back.
People's lawyer. He didn't say he was the governor's lawyer. And
you're the people's lawyer. You just said earlier that you don't stick up for the people. If the federal government's come to kick your door down, you don't want to deal with that. So, I don't know. Don't vote for Patrick Miles if you're for marijuana. That's all I got to say about that guy. So, over there on my birthday last week, the Bermuda House approved marijuana decriminalization. So, on December 8th, marijuana lovers in Bermuda received an early Christmas present with the House agreeing to decriminalize small amounts of cannabis on the island nation. Bermuda's Minister of Social Development, Zane De Silva, tabled the amendment to the Misuse of Drugs Act, which allowed the House to decriminalize possession of up to 7 grams of marijuana. Police will still be permitted to seize any amount of cannabis found, but once this amendment becomes law, 7 grams of cannabis or under will not be sanctioned with criminal prosecution. With that in mind, the Director of Public Prosecutions in Burma can still proceed with the charges if there is evidence of trafficking in any given case. Different but similar legislation to decriminalize cannabis was advanced in May but never made it to the Senate for review because of the general elections. As per the parliamentary process, the amendment should now go to the Senate. If Bermuda fully adopts this motion, it will join other island nations that have enacted cannabis reform, including Jamaica and the Cayman Islands. Jonathan Hiltz has been a journalist, TV producer, and marijuana advocate for over 16 years. They live in the Toronto area. All right. A couple of quick stories to finish this out in the health news. So over here we have the Children's Hospital of Philadelphia is to study medical marijuana and autism. That's pretty awesome. So the Children's Hospital of Philadelphia is pairing with an Australian biopharmaceutical company in what some advocates say could be the first major effort in the United States to study the effects of medical marijuana on children with autism. Athena Zupa, the director of the hospital's Center for Clinical Pharmacology, will lead a team researching current medical marijuana patients. The hospital will not provide any cannabis products to children. Quote, "This is truly an observational study," Zupa said. "We're not giving them anything, we're just gathering data to educate ourselves. Research with children who are already covered under Pennsylvania's safe harbor provision is likely to begin in early 2018. There is a significant anecdotal evidence showing that cannabinoids, the active compounds in medical marijuana, can help with some of the symptoms of autism. Cannabis advocates say cannabinoids help improve social interaction and control repetitive behavior and don't cause the side effects associated with antipsychotic drugs often given to autistic children. The study at CHOP will build on data collected by the Australian company Zelda Therapeutics, which is funding the research. Zelda, which completed another observational study on autism in Chile last year, is also set to start clinical trials in Australia to investigate the effectiveness of medical marijuana on chronic insomnia. The partnership between CHOP and Zelda was brokered by the Philadelphia area mother of an autistic child. Erica Daniels, founder of Hope Grows for Autism, said she was thrilled to have brought the two organizations together. For too long, patients and their families have been missing out on genuine therapeutic options with the potential to transform lives, Daniels said. Zupa said that little is known about how cannabis works in kids. Standard drugs are marketed after going through rigorous process by the FDA because the federal government considers marijuana to be a Schedule I drug akin to heroin and LSD. There have been no clinical trials in the U.S. for any cannabis product. Keep that in mind at all times. One of the aims of the CHOP study will determine what parents in the region are giving their autistic children. Cannabidiol, known as CBD, is a substance in marijuana that, unlike THC, does not induce euphoria. We're trying to understand the landscape of what kids are taking, Zupa said. Some kids are taking only CBD and some kids are taking a mixture of CBD and THC. I'm trying to understand how parents make their choices. Parents make their choices with autistic kids because nothing that everybody says is fucking medicine for it works. It's all bullshit. It's all like drugs. The attempt of these drugs generally seems to me is to turn kids into fucking zombies. Where they just like, just barely functionable, brain dead fucking droids. So maybe, I don't know. Maybe parents make decisions based on what they hear from other people that works, what they've seen. I don't know. And when it comes to the breakdown between CBD and THC versus CBD, I think parents start out, you just got to look at the path to least resistance. The path to least resistance for a parent, when looking into this, the first thing they're going to see is that CBD doesn't, have any potential for abuse or whatever. And if they know anything about CBD or THC, they're probably like one of those freaked out people that think that THC is this bad thing that the propagandists have made it out to be. So, um, they go ahead and try the CBD and THC stuff after the CBD only stuff has failed. That's just my guess, but that's the path to least resistance. I think the study should be pretty good, and we need these studies because, like they said, there's no federally approved studies, so we got to do all the studies we can until we have those kind of studies, and we have more studies. Here's another one, and this is coming out of Israel, where they are allowed to study it, so they have plenty of studies. If you ever need a study, they're your go-to place to look because they have all the studies. This one talks about what does cannabis do to your bones. A study published by the Journal of Bone and Mineral Research conducted by researchers from Tel Aviv University at Hebrew University. This study showed that a chemical in marijuana known as the cannabinoid cannabidiol, CBD, strengthens bones and accelerates the healing of fractures without causing any psychotropic effects. Not that anybody cares. We found that CBD alone makes bones stronger during healing, enhancing the maturation of collagenous matrix, collagenous matrix, which provides the basis for new mineralization of bone tissue. After being treated with CBD, the healed bone will be harder to break in the future. Well, that's pretty cool. The team of experts inflicted mild femoral fractures on rats. God, I didn't want to know that. And then gave an injection of CBD to some of them while others received CBD plus THC. They analyzed the healing between them and the rats that had not received any marijuana chemicals. Their conclusion was the rats injected with CBD experienced the same effects regardless of the addition of THC. Gabet added, "We found CBD alone to be sufficiently effective in enhancing fracture healing. Other studies have also shown CBD to be a safe agent, which leads us to believe we should continue this line of study in clinical trials to assess its usefulness in improving human fracture healing." Seems to be like the miracle drug you guys always said it wasn't. The same team previously found that the body contains receptors which respond to cannabinoid compounds, and they are not confined to the brain. The study shows that the skeleton has cannabinoid receptors which trigger bone formation and prevent bone loss. And the second study just confirmed this. Gabet said, "We only respond to cannabis because we are built with intrinsic compounds and receptors that can also be activated by the compounds in the cannabis plant. This study is just a part of all research dedicated to the medical benefits of marijuana compounds, and new findings might stimulate researchers to analyze the positive effects of marijuana in the treatment of osteoporosis and other bone diseases." Gabet added, "The clinical potential of cannabinoid-related compounds is simply undeniable at this point. While there is still a lot of work to be done to develop appropriate therapies, it is clear that it is possible to detach a clinical therapy objective from the psychoactivity of the cannabis. CBD, the principal agent in our study, is primarily anti-inflammatory and has no psychoactivity. The medical properties of marijuana are numerous, and it is primarily used to boost appetite in the case of AIDS, to lower side effect of chemotherapy, and to soothe chronic pain. Numerous studies claim that it can regulate blood sugar, decelerate the HIV progression, and treat multiple sclerosis and Parkinson's disease." And I'm just finding out more about Parkinson's disease. There's a form of Parkinson's disease that you can get just from eating psychotropic medications that they give people that are schizophrenic patients and other anxiety patients. So that's pretty fucked up. They're giving patients that could be using cannabinoids synthetic fucking crazy psychotropic drugs that actually cause Parkinson's symptoms. When they could have just gave them the cannabinoids all along and they never would have got the Parkinson's. Now they can give them cannabinoids for all their problems. I don't know. Researchers have shown that CBD suppresses seizures, inhibits the metastasis of many aggressive cancers, and destroys leukemia cells. The Journal of Neuropsychopharmacology published a 2013 study which discovered that CBD is an effective as one antipsychotic drug, which is commonly used in the treatment of schizophrenia and paranoia, but causes no side effects. Other studies have also found that CBD can be used as a safe antipsychotic. Marijuana is still technically illegal under U.S. federal law, but 17 U.S. states allow the use for CBD for limited medical functions. Plus, the laws of 23 other countries permit the medical use of marijuana. Marijuana is still classified as having no currently accepted medical use by the federal government, which might change this approach in a recent decision of the FDA. Not likely. And this is way back in October, by the way. And finally, last but not least, we have lost a great, almost icon in the medical marijuana community with the passage of Joanne McKee. So she was a devoted cannabis activist who helped patients long before Washington legalized. Joanne McKee, a pioneering medical marijuana activist in Washington state who went sometimes difficult lengths to obtain the drug for patients she served, has died at the age of 74. She passed away November 18th, said her longtime friend and fellow activist Dale Rogers. He was not certain of the cause. McKee was a fixture at marijuana policy hearings in the legislature where she often testified from a wheelchair, sporting a colorful eye patch and accompanied by her service dog. She and her partner Stitch Miller founded Seattle's first cannabis co-op, Green Cross Patient Co-op, in 1993, 5 years before Washington approved medical marijuana. She had used marijuana to treat debilitating pain from a moped accident and unsuccessful surgeries. After seeing a news report about cannabis buyers clubs for AIDS patients, she decided she wanted to give patients the excess marijuana she grew at her home on Bainbridge Island. She couldn't find a co-op to donate to, however, so she joined the Seattle AIDS support group in starting one, Rogers said. She and Miller also opened their home to patients. This was the height of the AIDS epidemic, said Roger, who lived with HIV for 3 decades. They knew how important this was. We didn't have housing rights or medical benefits rights, but we found out if we were a group working together, we were stronger. Difficulties with law enforcement were common. In 1995, news reports about McKee gathering signatures to legalize medical marijuana came to the attention of federal drug agents who persuaded local authorities to shut down her grow operation. Sheriff's officials seized 120 plants, but they did her a favor by hiding rather than seizing medicine bottles full of marijuana around her house so that the patients would still be able to access them, said Rogers and Douglas Hyatt, a Seattle lawyer who represented marijuana patients, including McKee, for more than 2 decades. Quote, she told me that later on she found bottles of cannabis in the couch cushions. McKee worked to pass Washington's medical marijuana initiative, but she threw her support behind the measure only after its authors agreed that it would not limit patients to having a certain number of plants. Voters approved it in 1998, 2 years after California became the first state to pass it. After the 1995 raid, McKee moved to West Seattle, where she resumed serving patients from her home. It could still be hard to find marijuana then, and she once met in the woods with the Hells Angels members to supply the co-op. She continued to face trouble with the law, though not criminal charges. Neighbors complained about the odor of marijuana and the heavy foot traffic, said Hyatt, who represented her at the time. Eventually, with the tacit approval of police and prosecutors, she moved her operation to an industrial part of the city's Georgetown neighborhood. Early on, she had contentious relationship with law enforcement, but she fought and she stuck it out, Hyatt said. But she was right, and she had the courage of her convictions, and they came to respect her. Lawyers did too. She was often called Hyatt and others to represent patients who'd been arrested. She'd twist your arm until you did it, even if you did it for free, he said. Among those who were scheduled to speak at the memorial on Thursday on what would have been her 75th birthday were King County Prosecutor Dan Satterberg and King County Council member Jan Cole Wells, a former state senator who spent her career advocating for medical marijuana patients at McKee's behest. Quote, "It never made sense to me that it should be illegal to use for medical purposes," Colwell said. She was instrumental in effecting an amazing amount of change in the way we approach cannabis. In other words, she just gave people some free weed that probably needed it. And, you know, that will conclude this week's episode of the Daily Dope Show. I will be making videos still. I don't really have a vacation schedule or whatever, so I'm not going anywhere. There might not be a whole lot of news coming out as everybody else goes on their vacations, and including the legislators that actually create the news in the first place. But what will happen is that you'll start seeing a lot of people talking about 2017. I have no choice, man. It was definitely one of the most crazy years for marijuana news that I've ever seen, including the fact that, you know, all the states that legalized in 2016, which was prior to this year, the busiest year for marijuana news that I've ever seen. But, you know, all those stories are finally coming to fruition, and next year, 2018, is going to be even bigger. And it comes down to it, is this train ain't stopping, baby. We're driving this fucking train all the way around the planet, and we're going to legalize marijuana everywhere we go. And as happy as that is for people that are going to make money off it, and there's this whole like scene of people that are like, yay, legalizing marijuana. We finally won. Now we get to make money and enjoy the spoils of our labor. Well, the thing about that is legalizing marijuana isn't the last stop for the train either. Ending prohibition will be. So I don't know if I'm going to see that in my lifetime. I sure hope so. But as we see the melting of the current structure of prohibition, the rearranging of the sellers from illegal underground markets to above ground, above board, legal markets, that transition could get ugly. And there's going to be smooth transitions and there's going to be ugly transitions depending on where you're at. And it all comes down to decriminalization. So we need a decriminalization to go along with legalization, or you're going to get a lot of arrests, because we've already seen that, and it's going to keep going. And, you know, you want to give the people that have the reefer madness, they're getting talking points, because in places like Colorado or whatever, where, you know, the legal age is 21 and up. So if you're 18, 19, or 20, you're what they're looking for. They're focusing on trying to arrest you for marijuana to make their statistics. Oh, look, teen use is going up. Teen arrests are up. Yeah. Well, that was it. That's all I got. If you like this channel, subscribe to it. I will be making a video about this newest round of YouTube bullshit going on. But one way you can help me through that would be to share this video with somebody. I don't know. It's a hard thing to do, because in person, definitely, like, it's hard. I don't know too many people, but I'm me, so of course I'm not going to know too many people that are going to want to, hey, watch one of my videos. It's an hour and a half long or 2 hours. But sometimes, you can get them too. I'll be back next week.